Anthony stopped paying due attention to his wife a long time ago. He looked more and more at other women and girls, allowing himself to sit with the men over beer. What can I say? The man was all like his grandfather and father, former immigrants from a distant village who lived in fishing and hunting. And even after moving to the city and marrying a city girl, Anthony did not give up his habits. This, of course, always infuriated Barbara. What can I do? She complained to her only friend and neighbor Sophie, an old teacher and Jewish woman, who it is unknown how she ended up in this city, and on what means she lived is unclear. But why do you think so? You are a smart, intelligent woman, a primary school teacher. And you say that. Don't I understand? It is you, Sophie, who have children and grandchildren who will stand up for you. On the other hand, who will stand up for me. Understand I'm an orphan, and thanks for that I was able to learn with my own head. And if Anthony chases me, then where should I go? To the old room? You're just afraid of difficulties. That's understandable, but then see for yourself. Anthony is a bore and an ignoramus. Ill-mannered, but on the other hand, they are all like that. Was it really possible that your late husband cheated? Barbara looked at her neighbor in surprise. I thought mine wasn't walking when I was carrying our first and second babies under my heart. I was walking. Just remember, Barbara, some walk wisely, while others, like yours, put it on display for everyone to see. Sophie, does everyone really know now that he has a mistress? The neighbor smiled sadly, looked at poor Barbara, and stroked her hand. Barbara, just come to terms with it, and think about how you can give birth to a baby. How long have you been together? In a few years. But it just doesn't work out. Yes, I haven't tried anything. I went to see doctors and sorcerers, but everything doesn't work out. The doctor says that the problem may be in the husband himself. Well, how do you find out? You can't ask him this directly. Knowing your husband's tough temper, I dare to assume that such a conversation will end in good hassle. Well, on the other hand, how to check? You really can't give him a mistress. If she got pregnant, that means the reason is you. At least on the other hand, he may leave for her if his mistress carries a child from him. And men are so unpredictable. No, Anthony won't leave. His father won't let him. Are you sure about this, Barbara? The woman nodded her head affirmatively, wiping away accumulated tears with a handkerchief. She had confidence in her father-in-law. It was he who found Barbara for his son, introduced him, and forced him to marry when he found out that they were dating, and even intended to live together. Then he threatened his son that, if he divorced Barbara, he would not see the inheritance of his own ears. And there was a considerable inheritance there, as the woman herself believed. Well, what if your mistress gets pregnant? What happens? He won't abandon his child, his dear one. He won't abandon him. He will pay child support. And then, if anything happens, he will arrange guardianship. He is such a... Especially if there is an heir, he will break anyone's head for him. And the mistress will not agree to blackmail. My hand is strong, and if anything happens, it can burn you. Yes, he's a tough guy. Okay, see for yourself, but by the way, I have a couple of friends here. They went to visit a knowledgeable grandmother. If anything, I ask her address. Thank you, Sophie, you will always listen to me and console me. Nothing, neighbor. What can you do? This is our lot. If you need anything, get back to me. The neighbor left, and Barbara sat for a long time at the kitchen table in the empty three-room apartment that Anthony's parents gave them for their wedding. And I thought and thought and thought and thought and couldn't come up with anything worthwhile. She understood that her husband was walking, and there was strong evidence for this. What can I do? Is it true? Shouldn't we put fly-agarics in his borscht so that he doesn't go for a walk? But the woman did not know how far her relationship with the beauty went, who came to their city to work as an agronomist and part-time accountant at a large woodworking enterprise. It was there that her husband worked as a mechanic, and she worked as a primary school teacher. How good you are today. Look what I brought you. And Anthony handed the woman a luxurious necklace made of natural pearls of dark blue, almost black color. Oh, Anthony, where did you get such beauty from? And what will your wife say to all this? What will she say? Nothing. I bought the same one for her too. So there's nothing to be offended by. But if you don't love her, then why are you still with her? The woman cunningly tried to find out what was going on in his house. My grandfather is on Barbara's side. And he said that if I divorced, I would be disinherited. And there, believe me, there is something to fight for. Come on, you're agile and young. Arms and legs, like everything else, are there. You can earn money on the spot. And with a laugh, she grabbed him by the place of origin. Jadwiga didn't want to miss out on Anthony. What if the wife finds out about us? The accountant gently wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed his chin. Nothing will happen, he will cry, that's all. Anthony was sure that this would happen. Even if we come to your house together? Jadwiga specifically emphasized the word your home while observing the reaction. Yours. Jadwiga, what are you talking about? What are you trying to achieve? When we started dating, we discussed this point. Don't touch your wife, you and I live separately. And she waits for me at home and cooks soups for me. Well, at least invite me to dinner? Or didn't I even earn that? Anthony, with a dissatisfied look, threw her hands off his shoulders and pulled away. He was already starting to get tired of this conversation. Okay, that's it. I have to go. Lunch was almost over, and I still hadn't had lunch. At the mere mention of homemade soup, Anthony felt a queasy feeling in his stomach and an urgent growl in his stomach. His Barbara's soup was always rich and delicious. Even my mother had never cooked something so delicious. So that means you don't love me? Jadwiga wailed in her polish and turned theatrically to the window, covering her face with her hands. Don't cry. I'll be back soon. In the meantime, it's time to work. Anthony quickly left the accountant's office and met his father nose to nose on the threshold. Dad, what are you doing here? His surprise knew no bounds. Yes, I decided to check on you, son. Your mother went home with Barbara to visit you. And I'm here, and I see that you've found yourself a new mistress. The man nodded at the sign hanging on the door of the accountant's office, Jadwiga Volchek. He looked at his son reproachfully, trying not to give him a ringing slap in the face. After all, this is not how he and his mother raised him. Oh, not like that. Bruno, although he came from the outback and had considerable health and masculine strength, never cheated on his wife. Yes, in my youth I had no hobbies, but when I got married I completely swore off cheating. But the son apparently didn't follow suit. He doesn't want to settle down. What are you talking about, Dad? I found out about salaries and bonuses. Do you really think everything is the worst? Oh, there's no need to tell me fairy tales. You reek of women's perfume a kilometer away. He shook his finger at him. Bruno wanted to say that he would sign over all his property to Barbara, but he lost his tongue just in time. It was not worth it to set up a woman like this ahead of time. Otherwise, you never know what would hit his fool in the head. Dad, for Barbara, I'll rip out anyone's throat, and she's my wife before people and God. Okay, at least you understand this. Okay, let's go home. I asked the director for you. My mother and I have a conversation with you. Anthony nodded and obediently followed his father. And Jadwiga stood under the door and heard it all perfectly. No, she didn't eavesdrop. It was just that the men spoke so loudly, openly, that everything could be heard perfectly behind the flimsy door. What now? All I can do is enjoy his caresses. He will never leave her, and a stingy tear rolled down her pretty face. Yes, what can I say? The woman was simply catastrophically unlucky. She didn't find a husband in her homeland, couldn't start a relationship, and there were only potential candidates for lovers. And so that someone would take them and ask them to marry. They simply weren't there. All the men passed by. Sometimes they stayed in her life longer, sometimes just for the night. Others spoke about her beauty, others about a woman's intelligence. Well, what does it matter to her? No family, no child, nothing. Jadwiga increasingly began to think about not just marrying Anthony, but having a baby with him. She knew from her lover that they had no children, but this family apparently had amassed enormous wealth. And maybe it's true. Follow your grandmother's advice and give birth to a boy or girl. Let it be a joy. Grandma, but how can I give birth? I've already tried and can't get pregnant. Maybe you can tell me what. And your boyfriend, does he have children? Or maybe infertile? This is important, granddaughter. Yes, it seems like he and his wife have no children. But on the side he said that there was a boy and a girl. And she might be lying. He's not lying, said the grandmother, laying out the cards on the table and looking at Anthony's fate. You know, my girl, I'll tell you one thing, that you shouldn't be together. But if you are thinking of giving birth to him, give birth. The baby will be nice, and his destiny will be wonderful. Granny, are you sure about this? Jadwiga looked carefully at the old woman who was smoking a pipe and looked at her granddaughter with a smile. Don't doubt it, I definitely see it. And my cards don't lie. The heredity there is good, and his relatives are rich. If they like their grandson, consider that a well-fed life is guaranteed for you. Jadwiga thought for a minute and began to finger her ancient rosary, mentally calculating each option. But then the grandmother took her word. Don't doubt it, you'll get more than you do now. The main thing is to conceive this child on your Anthony's marital bed in his home. Grandma, well, this is all ready. Don't think about it, do as I say, and everything will be good for you. Now go, I need to rest. Come tomorrow, I'll give you the collection. Just add it to your little man's food, and that's it. Consider it done. Oh God, thought Jadwiga, sitting behind the wheel of her car and heading towards the city. And why did she manage to go to her grandmother in the village for advice? Well, what can she advise? Herbs, rituals. Yes, in our age of technology and numbers, even though the very thought of the family's wealth haunted her. Maybe it's really worth thinking about the grandmother's words and not giving up on her plan? The woman turned the key in the ignition and pressed the gas pedal. The car let out a loud animal roar and took off, leaving behind a cloud of dust. Barbara had been studying with her students since the very morning. The woman was happy when she gave all of herself to the children, and they pleased her not only with good grades but also with their attention and love. But even today, Barbara more and more often returned her thoughts to yesterday's event, the arrival of Anthony's parents. They arrived and brought a bunch of gifts and local delicacies, but it was Anthony's mother who started the conversation with her, which alarmed and impressed this woman. Yes, it's understandable, old people always wanted grandchildren, but she and her husband lived for so long and nothing comes of it. This frightened her at first, then made her despondent, but now Barbara has simply resigned herself to it. They gave me an address here, and I strongly advise you to go to it. The woman handed her a piece of paper on which the address of one village was written in beautiful handwriting. Wow. Judging by the name, it is somewhere on the border with Romania or Poland. Barbara.
Yes. Did you understand everything correctly? This is the address of a healer. And by the way, she helped many of my friends. Because Barbara, my advice to you, if you want kids, go to her. If not, then I'm sorry. I tried to do the best, otherwise, God forbid, he will find a woman on the side and make her a child. And what's next?
Barbara was sitting on a chair, crumpling a napkin in her hand and nervously biting her lips. She understood perfectly well how right her mother-in-law was, and if no measures are taken, the husband may simply leave. But you are an educated woman. How can you believe in all these superstitions? These superstitions, as you say, my dear, have helped me more than once to return my husband to the family, to give birth to a son, and to do many other things with the help of the most ordinary herbs and words. Don't underestimate this power. And what do you have to lose? Nothing at all, Barbara thought to herself, wiped away her tears and looked carefully at the piece of paper. And I'll tell Anthony that you'll come to rest with me. So don't worry about my son. Barbara mentally nodded her head and agreed. In the evening, lying in bed, she returned to this conversation over and over again. Anthony did not come home, and since his parents arrived, he spends the night in the garage. To all the questions why, he answered sharply that he did not intend to listen to his parents' moral teachings, so he would simply live in the garage. It's good that at least I come home for dinner, and you cook your own signature soup. Barbara smiled and nodded her head to her husband, because she knew perfectly well that he simply adores her signature dish and cannot live without it. He even once jokingly said that if they separated, he would definitely come to her for dinner. Anthony, what makes you think that I will have a new husband? Do I need you and only you? Yes, that's me, by the way. This was at the very beginning of their relationship. But now the issue with the children has become so urgent that even her signature dish is not able to save the rapidly sinking marriage. Okay, maybe it's good, but the face is not at home. It will be possible to pay attention to his parents and calmly think about the words of his mother-in-law, in whose person she found an assistant. Yeah, what if he really took a mistress? And the garage is just a go-ahead. Barbara turned over on her side and then simply got out of bed and began to walk around the room. She was truly tormented by doubts, but what could she do? She was distracted from her sad thoughts by a quiet knock on the door. Barbara, aren't you sleeping? The mother-in-law's voice was quiet so as not to wake up her already sleeping husband. "No, Mary, come in. I heard you spinning around from the next room. And now you are pacing the room. Are you still thinking about my words or whether Anthony has found someone else?" "Both. It's all somehow intertwined into a ball. And to be honest, I can't figure it out. Everything is going so smoothly with you and your husband." "Hey, no, honey, now we've gotten used to each other. And in his youth, my Nicholas was very wayward and violent. Do you know what guys from the outback are like in this regard? Jealous and free at the same time. Do not, you know. Maybe even good. Anthony is ours, one might say almost urban. Not too rowdy. But according to your Nicholas, you wouldn't say that he is so violent. Oh, take my word for it. If you looked at the wrong person, you'll get a slap in the face. The dress was shorter than it was supposed to be. It could have been pulled by the hair. Not to mention wearing makeup to work, especially to the store. It even got to the point that one day he cut my hair. Imagine. Are you kidding? Barbara listened and couldn't believe it all. It was so. A friend invited me to her wedding, and Nicholas was in town then. Imagine someone told him that your wife not only came to the wedding in a new dress, but also braided her hair with ribbons. So he flew in like crazy, grabbed a sickle and cut off my braid with ribbons right at the back of my head. I then roared over my braid, and it was a noble one, as thick as my arm. I raised her from a very young age. I hope Anthony won't be like that. Don't worry about it. By the way, my grandmother also helped people, which is why she helped pacify my Nicholas's temper and give birth to Anthony. Don't look. I didn't immediately carry a little one under my heart, probably in the 5th year of marriage. And now I want to help you too. But why? Why do you need this? Then, for my Anthony, I want the best wife and daughter-in-law. And that's who you are. After all, you never know what kind of bitch would covet her husband as much as our wealth. Believe me, I've seen more than one of these. But this is so lyrics and romances. Now, don't think. Better put on your robe and let's go to the kitchen to drink tea. I brought one wonderful collection. It will help improve your sleep and calm your nerves. 2 women were sitting in the kitchen by candlelight and drinking tea. They chatted like old friends. And who would have thought that mother-in-law and daughter-in-law could get along so well? Nobody. The next day, early in the morning, Mary dialed her son and, in the tone of a gallant commander, clearly said, "Anthony, are you coming home for breakfast?" Apparently, the son said that he had already had breakfast. That's why she immediately posed the next question. "By the way, I need Barbara. And I'm temporarily taking her from your family nest. I hope not for long. Don't worry, son, you won't be left an orphan without food. I want to send the girl to a resort for a couple of days to relax." Well, with your commanding tone, how can anyone argue with you? Take it. And let Barbara rest as much as she wants. That's what we decided on. Well, Barbara, now you are free like a bird for a few days, or even a week. By the way, if necessary, I will help you apply for sick leave at work. Yes, in principle, it's not worth it. We have summer and holidays. True, first graders sometimes attend after-school classes, but due to the accumulated weekends and days off, I can find time during the week. But what will I tell her? I have never communicated with such people. Nothing. You just come to her, and then she will do everything herself. There are rumors about her that the old woman sees everything. Barbara took a sip of aromatic tea and looked carefully at her mother-in-law, trying to understand and accept everything she was saying. Don't worry, you'll find her right away. Within a few days, Barbara packed a small bag and called a taxi that took her to the station. Standing on the platform, she kept thinking, is she doing the right thing? Yes, maybe it's true, Mary. It's better to do it and regret it than not to do it and rack your brains over the missed chance. Yes, don't doubt it, you're doing everything right. The young voice of a handsome boy sounded right next to her ear, and Barbara jerked in surprise. Sorry if I scared you. Do you need help with things? Yes, I would be grateful. Are you in this carriage? Yes, 13th place. Wow, a damn dozen. But you are coming with us, dear lady, and our cheerful company will entertain you all the way, if you don't mind. Yes, of course, I don't mind. Give me your bag. and the guy helped her bring her things to her place and sat her down when the cheerful company of young guys began to take their places. Barbara looked carefully at the cheerful guys who were apparently going on a camping trip. "You are probably going on a hike?" Barbara carefully inserted her word into the conversation of the young people. "Well, how can I say a hike? We fifth-year students are studying the culture of one fascinating region on the border of 3 cultures. And so we go to the village. We will collect local stories, ethnic groups, songs, as they say, the culture of the local indigenous population, and the 3 nationalities living in this region. Or rather, within the framework of one very interesting village for us." "How amazing. This means that God himself sent you to me. I am also going to this village." At that moment, the conductor looked into their compartment and sweetly asked if they needed a bed and whether they should serve tea. "Yes, dear girl," said Barbara. "Serve it. In the meantime, in return I treated you to a pie from my grandmother." "Oh, thank you. This will be for dinner. And by the way, as you understand it, you are traveling in compartments for everyone? We arrive in the morning, almost before dawn. Don't worry, I'll wake you up. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll bring bed linen and tea later." The conductor left, and the company continued to settle down in its places. Yes, God sent me these young people. It will be fun to ride. And if anything happens, they will show you what and where on the spot. But how to start an interrupted conversation, Barbara thought. But then the young man himself took the conversation in the right direction. "What is your name?" "Here I am, Oleg. And you, as I understand it, are going with us to the same village." "I am Barbara, as the Georgian queen, and apparently I am going with you." "Affairs?" "Yes, there is one thing. I think you will also find it interesting." "Wow. We are directly pursued by success all the way to this region," Oleg said confidently, and he sat down more comfortably, preparing to listen. "Apparently you have something to tell us." "Yes, they told me that there is in this village, somewhere even on its outskirts, an old woman who seems to be a healer, herbalist, and witch all rolled into one. Young people, I just ask you not to laugh, but I need to get to her." "Wow. It's as if God himself sent you to us. Can we go to her with you? It's true, we are interested in everything. But if you don't mind." "Yes, I don't mind. On the contrary, the support of young people is important to me. I really hope you won't laugh at me, that like this, an older woman believes in all this nonsense." "No, we won't laugh," the girl said and extended her hand in greeting. "My name is Helga. Can you tell me what problem you are coming to her with, if it's not a secret?" Barbara closed her eyes for a minute and wondered whether it was worth exposing her own grief and problems to people's rumors. But at that second it burst through her. "What can I say? After all, each of us has had moments when we want to talk about everything to a stranger, to shift our problems at least for a minute. Yes, you understand, young people. Maybe I'm wrong myself. Maybe it just happened this way, but my husband and I haven't been able to have a child for a year now. They seem to be healthy, they underwent examinations, but nature does not give us a chance to become parents. Maybe the problem is me. After all, my husband has a child on his side. But that's what they say, and I'm barren. My mother-in-law treats me as if she were her own daughter, but not at all. I'm afraid that my husband will leave for someone else, and she will give birth to a child, and I will remain out of work. Yes, and I intuitively feel that he has a mistress. I don't know how serious it is." The company of young people listened and remained silent, because everyone understood her grief and sadness, and then Alex tried to somehow cheer everyone up. "And here you will check how much the old woman is a master of her craft. But by the way, our curator, historian Pablo, spoke about an old woman living in this village. Maybe this is her. This will be great. Sure, the topic of my fortune-telling." And he cheerfully raised his hand, and his idea was immediately picked up by the girl Helga. "Then the topic of ancient rituals for pregnancy is mine. This, by the way, is very interesting, and as far as I know, no one has written it yet. So my work will be unique and inimitable." "There is nothing unique. After all, this is all well-forgotten old stuff," said a guy with a thin beard that made him look like a deacon from the local parish from the top shelf. Barbara listened to them and smiled. After all, how good it was to travel in the company of such young people, ready to help and support in the most unusual decision. It was fun to ride. Evening imperceptibly turned to night, and the company, slowly settling into place, began to prepare for bed. The only one who could not sleep was Barbara, who was lying and looking at the shelf. I thought about the old woman, about her relationship with her husband, and about what would happen next. And Anthony at these moments was hugging the other one with all his might, giving her caresses and kisses. The woman carefully pulled her lover away from her and looked into his eyes. Maybe we shouldn't rush and act like this thoughtlessly. Your parents are probably at home, and I'm not interested in tumbling on my marital bed. Jadwiga, but understand, my wife and I haven't slept together for a month. Yes, and I like you very much. He tried to kiss her, but she pulled away, and breaking away from his embrace, sat down at her desk. I don't think this is a good idea. Yes, and I need to work. Work. How to bring you gifts, you always had time. The same skins for your new mink coat, ring and all. How now? I'm free, you need to work. Amazing. Jadwiga realized that she had gone a little too far, immediately jumped up and walked up to Anthony, gently hugging his waist. She kissed him lightly on the chin, but didn't get angry. You see, I need to get used to the idea that you and I will be doing this in the place where you slept with your wife. Just give me time. Okay, I'll go. I still need to eat and work. But tomorrow I think you and I will come to visit me. He winked at her and left the office, quietly closing the door. Anthony walked down the corridor and whistled a light melody, and Jadwiga put her head on her hands folded on the table and sobbed silently. But the truth is, how could she stoop to just running after a married man like that, being led by him? But in her youth she was the first beauty for whom the most enviable gentleman remained. Now what? There is simply no trace left of the past. How to be? Maybe we should just pack our things and move to another city and get a new job. Although on the other hand, what will change from this? Well, even if she finds a new job there, what will that do for her? Absolutely nothing. After all, Anthony's place will be taken by another, the same. She wiped away her tears and opened the window, taking a few deep breaths. We need to calm down, otherwise the director will come in and she'll be sitting there, crying and ugly. What will she say about her eyes then? As for Anthony, it's worth going to visit him and doing as her grandmother told her. Then you can think about the future. But Jadwiga did not even suspect that the fast train from the outback was taking Barbara to her own grandmother. Well, Barbara, our station Oleg said when all 5 of them went out onto the platform early in the morning, when the sun had not yet risen, and the early fog covered the grass with a shroud. Now let's get your suitcase and think about what we should do. Come on, Oleg, I'll carry him myself, he's light. By the way, look, there is a horse harnessed to a cart. Maybe they will give us a ride to the village. Indeed, nearby stood a horse harnessed to a cart, where a man of unknown age was dozing. He always came to the station with his mare, because he knew very well that only this train would make a stop near their village. And many of the sufferers are looking for their famous grandmother Elsa, as everyone called her. And at her age, she could still give odds to many young people. What kind of braid? As thick as your hand and up to your waist. One day he saw Elsa swimming late at night on their lake. Where even strong men don't go, they said that this lake has no bottom. Who wants to check whether this is true or not? And she splashed in the water, on which the shimmer of moonlight glittered. How can you not believe that she is a witch? Especially when this old woman comes out of the water, and her wet hair, like a veil down her back, drags along her waist. Bruno. He shook the reins, and his filly set off, heading as usual towards the people. Young good. By any chance did you come to visit our Elsa? Yes to her. And you probably wait for such petitioners and sufferers every time. No, my grandmother told me about you. And he burst into a very unpleasant laugh, which gave many goosebumps. But seriously, I'm here every morning, because they go to see our grandmother a lot, so that's how I earn extra money. Get into the cart, I'll take you in. If necessary, you can stay in my hut. I live alone, and the house is big. Thank you, Alex said and looked at his companions. You were sent to us by higher powers. But I don't know what higher powers are. But since we came, it was certainly out of great need. Come on, sit down. There's no need for you to be cold. We'll come to me, give you some tea, and then to our grandmother's. But she doesn't accept morning prayers before the end. And she lives in the village. And how far is it from you? Alex couldn't calm down and kept asking the man, and he answered very willingly. Well, how is it in the village? Rather, behind the village, go a couple of kilometers further inland to the forest lake. She lives on the edge of the forest and collects herbs there. Does she have any relatives? Barbara inserted her word, trying to keep up with the young people and not be branded a prude. Yes, I had a daughter, but she died of a cold. An only granddaughter, Jadwiga, remained, but she lives in the city and rarely visits her grandmother. The girl became arrogant that Elsa would give her her gift. But I think that's where it all ends. Jadwiga has no talent, or doesn't, or simply doesn't want to. And then let them decide among themselves. The places here were truly beautiful, such a nature untouched by man and technology. Apparently her mother-in-law was right. These are places of power, but soon they stopped in front of a fairly large house, where their driver directed his horse and jumped off the cart as usual. He extended his hand to Barbara and said, "Let me help you. My name is Bruno. What about you?" The man's eyes were so blue that such a color simply does not exist in nature. Barbara, the woman said, spellbound, and extended her hand. Bruno's palm turned out to be tender and strong at the same time, and with a slight movement the man helped her get off the cart, took her suitcase, and led her into his house. More precisely, it was not a simple village house, but a solid wood frame, which not everyone could afford. And as the woman noted, almost all the houses in the village were made of logs. Yes, we have a fairly prosperous village, and all thanks to Elsa. The man's words sounded like an answer to Barbara's silent question. It's because of her that a lot of people come to us, and where there is demand, there will always be supply. It's right. And the nature in your village is beautiful. Well, go into the house and serve tea, as promised. You can have tea, or something stronger. And if necessary, a bathhouse can be organized. The man said in a quiet voice, smiled slyly, and looked at the woman with bright blue eyes. This look, voice and touch made Barbara feel either sweaty or cold. She had never experienced anything like this with Anthony, who was the only man in her life. Lord, how embarrassing, the woman thought. To come to such a wilderness for help in order to save the family, and look at yourself. Barbara, look. Oleg's voice distracted her from such thoughts, and she looked in the direction where the guy was pointing. The sun was rising over the horizon. Barbara was truly delighted with what she saw, because she had almost never seen a sunrise like this, and what she saw amazed her. Bruno, it's so beautiful here that you can't even imagine. Probably for me. A villager cannot understand all this beauty. But I ask you to come into the house. Barbara entered the house and looked around. Is this really how people live in villages? Everything in the house was done with taste and skill. TV and refrigerator, microwave, massive table, and beautiful carved chairs. In general, this could be called a merchant's house, but not a cab driver's house. Yes, she should live here. Apparently, Bruno saw it all on her face and said directly, "If you want, you can stay here as long as you want." Bruno, thank you, of course, but you practically don't know me, and you never know what trouble I came here with. Yes, what a disaster. The man has your woman, but you cannot conceive a child. Do not argue. I see a lot too. But you, Barbara, decide your fate. The man shook his curly head and did not continue what he wanted to say. Bruno understood that silence is often golden. And Barbara smiled and thought for a minute maybe she really should leave her Anthony and start living here with this local handsome guy in this distant village and give birth to a bunch of little kids. God, how she wanted this to simply forget her past and come here. Bruno, thank you, but their conversation was interrupted by young people who had just managed to put things in the rooms allocated to them and went out into the hall. Alex looked carefully at Bruno and Barbara and immediately understood everything, but did not show it. Bruno, what about your famous tea? They say that you brew it with special herbs. This is what it is. But sit down. I'll put on the kettle and treat you to more honey than you've ever tasted in your life. When will it be possible to see Grandma? Don't worry, we won't miss it. In our village there is a small church, and then the church bell rang, which means the service is over. Then we can get ready. The woman nodded her head and sat down on a bench that stood under the icons, while Bruno and the young people set the table. After half an hour, such an aroma wafted through the room that you could lose your head from this sweet variety, and the smell of pies and honey made your stomach growl. Wow. What smells? What a treat for the eyes and belly, Helga said and reached for the pie. I'm so hungry that I'm ready to eat everything. Eat up, girl. You, as a future mother, will still need strength, Bruno said and looked at her carefully. Helga almost choked from these words, but casting a sideways glance at Bruno, did not say anything to him. Maybe this Bruno really knows that he won't even have to go to his grandmother, Barbara thought mentally. Good afternoon. Barbara crossed the threshold of a small house standing on the edge of the forest. Come on in. Don't stand in the doorway of my house. I'm glad to have guests. A stately and beautiful older woman, with a long braid, she looks like the heroine of old paintings, but certainly not like an old woman who brews another batch of potion and dries bats. As I understand it, you are coming to me about your husband. Yes, my name is Barbara, and my husband is Anthony. And I also came about the children. There is no way we can give birth to them. Yes, and you will not give birth to them from your own. He walks, and as long as she keeps him under her thumb, you will not live. Yes, and without her you would have separated. It's just a matter of time. Barbara was simply stunned by what she heard and almost fainted, leaning on the door frame. To avoid falling, she grabbed the door handle and closed her eyes for a second. Yes, I see that you didn't know about it, although you internally suspected it. So quickly sit down at the table. Here, have a drink. Barbara sat down on a bench and took a wooden mug with a drink from the witch's hands, drank it in one gulp, and, looking at it, said quietly, What am I supposed to do? What should I do? Waiting for a new husband. Although no, your destiny has already found you. Just wait a little and everything will be fine for you. And your own home, and children, and a good husband. Are you sure about that? Barbara still hoped that this was some kind of prank, and she would now get up, go home, and everything would be fine with them. Wait, and your destiny will come. I wonder who is my betrothed. Barbara looked at the woman ironically, not knowing how to react to the words, believe them or take them as a joke. You don't believe me, but I'll tell you one thing: he will have blue eyes. Dark-haired. Yes, you yourself will recognize him among many. Such a prince on a white horse. And Elsa burst into cheerful laughter. Then she sat down next to Barbara and looked carefully into her eyes. Taking her hand in hers, the healer began to stroke it and whisper something in an incomprehensible language. The woman sat spellbound and looked at her carefully, not knowing how to react, and then she simply began to feel inclined to sleep. And my head involuntarily dropped into my hands. Sleep, my girl, sleep. You didn't come here from a good life, from your orphanhood. But I will take away all your troubles, and may you dream about your real destiny. And Elsa carefully laid her down on the bench, put a pillow under her head, and went out into the yard where a group of young people were sitting. She glanced at the eldest among them and waved her hand, beckoning him to her. I see you are the eldest here. So listen, Barbara is sleeping now. Don't worry, everything will be fine with her. What do you understand, students? Yes, we have folklore expeditions, and if possible, then maybe you can tell us local legends, songs, or signs. Yes, young people these days are not too interested in magic, and even my granddaughter over there refused the gift, and I was so hoping to pass on my knowledge to her. And what will happen to your gift now? Helga looked carefully at this still strong woman and bit her lip, afraid to ask too much. What will happen, my dear? And she looked at another as her successor. Is that allowed? I take it this is a man? You understand everything correctly, man. And although in our family it is customary to pass the gift from grandmother to granddaughter, but if God is not worthy of a girl or something else, the gift should be passed on to a man. Interesting. What if he had no talent for your knowledge? My dear guests, understand that each of us has magic, and sometimes it hides so deeply that it is simply difficult to awaken it. But it exists, believe me, believe me. They sat and talked about everything and nothing, and Barbara was sleeping, and most surprisingly, she dreamed of the same Bruno who brought them from the station. But in this dream, it was no longer a simple man in old jacket and sneakers, but a handsome middle-aged man looking at her intently. And next to him stood two beautiful blue-eyed children. Barbara shouted his name so loudly that everyone on the street heard her voice and jumped out and quickly rushed into the house. Barbara, are you okay? Helga was the first to run up to her and took her hand. Yes, it was probably a dream. And there was Bruno who brought us here, 2 children, he took them into the house. Our house. So I saw my betrothed, thought Elsa. Barbara herself did not understand why she was so angry at the words of this woman that her future husband would come to her in a dream. But she jumped up from the bench and quickly ran out into the street. The woman, not understanding what she was doing, quickly headed away from the Elsa house towards the village with the only desire to pick up her things and leave here for her usual little world. Barbara, wait, where are you going? Bruno's voice sounded so unexpectedly that the woman tripped out of the blue and fell to her knees with all her might, painfully breaking her knee. Bruno, who asked you to scare you like that? Now my knees are broken. Forgive me, for God's sake, let's go, I'll treat your wounds. I have a first aid kit at home. It's not far from here, a few houses away. Already at home, Bruno himself treated her wounds and carefully looked at her face. What did our seer tell you? Judging by the expression on your face, you didn't like it at all. Imagine I didn't like it. I went for advice, but the outcome was completely different. Well, this happens in our world. Elsa said that there would be another, and this one was different. You, Bruno, came to me in a dream with 2 small children. Now Bruno himself was taken aback by what he heard and almost dropped from his hands the can of milk that he had brought from his neighbor. Is this really her, his destiny, which he has been waiting for so long, and which Elsa herself spoke about? This is the turn of events. He put the jar on the table, took out a cup and poured milk into it. He handed it to the woman. Drink this milk. Don't want. They've already given me something to drink in the morning. And after that it turned out that you are my destiny. What will happen after this milk? And she nodded towards the table with her head. Nothing will happen, because the milk is fresh. But whatever you want, I'll drink. Having poured himself some milk, Bruno drank the cup in one gulp and, putting it on the table, sat down on the bench. It turned out strange. But if this is true, then this woman is his future wife, and he will have the children he so wanted. Barbara, what if you really are my destiny? And in your dream, did you really see our children? Bruno, do you understand how unrealistic and stupid this all is? We have only known each other for a couple of hours. We are seeing each other, one might say, for the first time. And you are talking about a family that may not exist. After all, I am married and I have a husband. Barbara, I'm sorry if I allowed myself more than I should, but I believe and I really want to have a family, children. And you are such a beautiful woman, I don't dare detain you any longer. At least you can always count on my hospitality. Thank you, Bruno, I understand you, but it all seems so unreal and mystical to me. How? It's like a fairy tale. Bruno looked at the woman with a smile and noted that she smiled back at him. And thank you for your hospitality. If you accept, I will come to visit you again. Clean, so relax. Come. I will always be glad to see you. That's what they decided on. And in the evening, Bruno was taking the whole company back to the station, where the fast train heading to the capital was supposed to stop for. 3 minutes. Bruno helped load things into Barbara's carriage and, looking at her, said quietly, "If you need my help, come. I will not betray you, and I have enough money I can provide for you." Bruno, thank you. I'll think about your proposal and, if necessary, I'll come. She stood at the window and waved her hand to him, and Bruno stood on the platform, and his heart sank with melancholy and sadness. That's how his love left, and he couldn't do anything. All we could do was wait and hope that the witch was right and Barbara would return. Barbara drove home, thinking about what the local healer told her. Barbara, did you get answers to your questions? Alex looked at the woman carefully. Don't even know. I had more questions than answers. What should we do with them? She shrugged and turned out the window. I began to look at the trees, stations, and houses flying past without finding an answer. Barbara thought and thought and thought and thought, and time passed inexorably, giving no hope for a better outcome. Anthony, hello. Here I am. Barbara tried to put a smile on her face, because according to legend, she returned from vacation and should have been fresh and rested. But the answer was silence in the apartment. Strange. At the station, she called Anthony and said she was on her way. To which the husband snapped, "Come, I'm home." Yes, Anthony was at home, but not alone, but with Jadwiga. The woman finally came to his home and spent the night on her lover's marital bed. Tea. Now, Anthony, I'll probably go. Now your wife will arrive. I don't want her to see me. Now I will decide in this house. I'm tired of you and I constantly hiding, and I think we should talk frankly with my wife and amicably decide what and how. Are you sure? The mistress looked at him carefully and stroked his hair. Yes, I am sure. In the meantime, my wife is traveling. The couple was so carried away by each other that they simply did not hear the door open and Barbara enter the apartment. She called her husband, and without receiving an answer, followed the noise into her own bedroom. What opened before her eyes instantly threw the woman into shock, and she simply did not know what to say, what to do. Barbara stood and looked at all this obscenity and simply remained silent. But Jadwiga noticed her first and screamed. The woman pulled the blanket over herself, covering her naked body. Anthony, stop. She pushed him and pointed at the doorway with her eyes. Barbara, weren't you taught to knock? There was anger and indignation in his voice. After all, his own wife dared to stop him at a very interesting place to knock. Anthony, are you serious? You brought your mistress into our bedroom, and I have to knock on the door of my own apartment. Yes. In the meantime, please, my dear wife, prepare some food for us while we rest. From such words, Barbara was not only speechless, she fell into a kind of stupor. Stupor shackled her thoughts and will, and leaving her suitcase in the corridor, she obediently went to the kitchen. A mountain of unwashed dishes, leftover potatoes on the stove, dried soup, all this was waiting for her there. Anthony's voice sounded impudent, arrogant, and mocking. Imagine, my dear husband, I cooked soup. And she threw a pan of boiling water onto the bed, almost hitting Anthony and his mistress. What is your crazy wife doing? Jadwiga screamed and jumped out of bed naked, grabbed her clothes and began to dress feverishly. She should be sued. Look, I have a burn on my legs. Better yet, take her to a mental institution. Madhouse? Barbara could not believe her ears and the fact that her husband did not react in any way to his mistress's words. I'll call the police now and they'll take you away from here. Barbara, calm down and don't shout. We need to talk about how adults can decide, so to speak, everything amicably. Amicably, my dear husband. They decide to dress and not jump out of bed. You don't have to worry. I don't need your excuses, explanations, and everything else. She threw the empty pan on the bed and went to her room. She began to collect things in her bag, throwing them away without folding them. Barbara grabbed documents, money, and the few jewelry that her husband had given her from the table, and throwing everything into a small backpack, ran out of the room. Barbara quickly headed towards the exit, but her path was blocked by Anthony, who had managed to put on trousers for decency. Barbara, where are you going? What are you doing? Don't you see? Jadwiga said with a malicious smile. She simply leaves you, and you should just file for divorce. Jadwiga, I didn't give you my word here. Let him clean for you, cook, iron your shirts, get along with your mother and father. Or have you forgotten what your parents told you when you married me? Anthony would never forget these words. When they first submitted an application to the registry office, the father threatened, "This is your first and last marriage. Take care of your family. If you get divorced, all your property will be transferred to your daughter-in-law. And it doesn't matter for what reason they would divorce, there will be no children, or the wife won't please. My mother and I will always be on my daughter-in-law's side. Moreover, Barbara Sirota, and to offend such people is a sin. It's a sin, Father, to live with someone you don't love. But I won't leave Barbara." But now he remembered that conversation, and he had no choice but to bite his lips and think about what to do. Jadwiga jumped out of bed at such words and, like a fish, gasped for air. She simply did not expect such a turn of events. It was not easy for her to accept the fact that her legal wife so easily accepted the very fact of betrayal, but also that this person has every chance of ending up on the street, and in the status of a beggar and homeless man. And who needs it? Anthony tried with all his might to restrain his anger and not raise his hand against his wife, so as not to kill her. Do you understand that it was a moment of weakness?
So minute that you had enough time to get from work and here. Anthony, don't try to tell me stories now. You have been with this woman for quite a long time, and thank God that everything turned out this way.
It happened. How is that?
Jadwiga could not forgive anyone for disgracing her like that, and not even allowing her to get a word in.
Jadwiga, you are a grown woman. You were simply used. You satisfied your own ego, and that's all. Or did you think that he would give up his wealth for you? Never. Has he ever given you a valuable gift? No, I didn't give it. Only a bouquet of lilies of the valley, and even then from our city flower bed. Jadwiga, of course, blatantly lied about everything, trying to downplay the importance of Anthony in her life, as well as the volume of financial investments in her. You see, did you want to cheat him out of money? Barbara stopped for a minute and mentally wondered if she had taken everything, if she had taken all the most valuable things. Barbara came out of the entrance and looked carefully. Yeah, there's Anthony's car. The neighbors on the bench have been gossiping since the very morning the kids have been scurrying around in the sandbox. The woman put her backpack on the bench and thought for a minute. Where should she go? No, as a last resort, you can, of course, call your mother-in-law and ask to stay with her for the first time. Barbara didn't even know how and what to do next, because Anthony knows where she lives, or rather, she lived before, and where she works. For the sake of money, he will pester her with his visits, ask for forgiveness, and try to return her. But no, I won't let you interfere in my life. What if you return to the village, to that same Bruno, to his log house, and stay there forever? Barbara thought to herself and sat down on the bench for a minute. But then the front door slammed and Anthony ran out into the street, all disheveled and angry. Apparently the showdown with Jadwiga was serious. Look, her husband's face is so red. The anger makes my eyes flash like lightning. He looked for Barbara, and when he noticed her on the bench, he exhaled with relief and approached, trying to speak as calmly as possible. Barbara, I ask you, let's talk quietly and calmly. Let's talk like adults and reasonable people. How's that? Do reasonable people really just drag all sorts of indecent things onto the marital bed? Well, you see, she tempted me. But I love you. Don't drive me away. It seems to me that you are more worried about your parental capital than about me, or where I was on how to resolve the issue with children. What would you do if she got pregnant? Would you live with 2 families? But this is a utopia. Your parents would not accept this state of affairs. And where would you do something? Oh, Anthony, tell me, please. Don't know. Anthony really didn't know what he would do next. After all, he never planned his life so far ahead. And now I will still stay with you. No, Anthony, I just don't need you. Sorry, but I'm leaving you.
Okay, now I have a question. And where do you intend to go?
He stood and looked at her with an angry, twisted face, cherishing the last hope that his wife would ask to go home. Believe me, my dear hubby, this question should not worry you in any way. Yeah, that means you have someone to go to. And you will tell me that I am cheating on you. Were you really planning on leaving for someone else? I don't have any lover, and you shouldn't attribute your own sins to me, and I can go, for example, live with your mother for a while, and then think about who I should be with. She turned around and, picking up her bag, walked towards the roadway, where on the side of the road she simply raised her hand and began to catch the car. But the woman did not want to upset Mary, and she will tell her all her adventures later. Now it's time to think and think about everything calmly. And where are we going, dear girl? The driver winked at her cheerfully and turned the ignition key in his old, but still working car with checkers on the door. Come on, she waved, so to speak, without looking at the train station. The driver nodded his head in understanding and rushed off, trying to drive carefully and avoid getting into holes and potholes so that the passenger with sad eyes, God forbid, would not get seasick. They drove for quite a long time, about 15 minutes, or even 20. Although, needless to say, it was the peak of the lunch break, and it was also Friday. Many residents of the metropolis tried at these moments to leave the stuffy city, but she wanted to see Bruno again. Sorry, did you say something? The driver looked carefully at this strange passenger, who was muttering something absurd under her breath. Did you tell me something? Oh no, sorry, I didn't say anything. Probably from an old habit. The taxi driver nodded understandingly and continued on his way. And Barbara continued to look out the window at the city landscapes flying by, and with every second her confidence grew more and more. Confidence that she should go to Bruno and come what may. And let me be considered a walker, but at least this is honest. And then I'll go to court. The taxi driver looked in the mirror at his passenger and did not say a word. You never know what kind of clients you come across. The main thing is that they get paid. And then it's no longer his business. Barbara paid the driver and, taking her bag, entered the old station building. She looked at the display of departing and arriving trains. Yeah, here's the direction she needs. Girl, give me a ticket for the evening train number 157. Yes, full. When the ticket was in her pocket, Barbara realized how hungry she was. Yeah, from one train to another. And I didn't even have time to change clothes, eat, or take a normal shower. That's why she wildly wanted to throw off her dusty clothes, stand under the stream of hot water and wash away all her sorrows. But in the evening, Barbara sat comfortably in her compartment and, taking out a mirror, carefully looked at her reflection. It's good that I at least washed my face in the toilet, otherwise I would have walked around looking tired and exhausted. It's such a pity that she didn't take Bruno's phone. After all, even if he doesn't want to accept her, he'll simply send her home. So what should she do then? Yes, do nothing. I'll just go back to my room and continue working. Although why on earth would she return to her little room? She legally has the right to part of the apartment, which his parents gave her and Anthony for their wedding. Therefore, to hell with dogs. Out of principle, I won't let you live comfortably with your mistress. And it's true. And this Jadwiga wanted not only to grab her husband with a hook, but also her property. What if she can get pregnant? Barbara tossed and turned in bed all night with such thoughts, but could not sleep a wink. Just before dawn, she went out into the vestibule and began to look out the window. Forest, fields, power lines, all this flashed before her eyes, like her own life, gray and joyless. And I really wanted normal human relationships, warmth and comfort. Girl, your station is next. The conductor handed her a ticket and smiled sweetly. So all my life on wheels. The carriage is her home, Barbara thought. But apparently everyone chooses their own destiny. It's nothing you can do. After 20 minutes, she was already standing on an empty platform far from her house and turning her head just like the first time. Everything around was shrouded in fog. It was so quiet that you could hear the dew dripping from the grass. Yes, neither Bruno nor his cart and mare were visible. Was she really so mistaken, and he simply didn't come? But he said that he's here every day. But as it turned out, he lied. Barbara stood and almost cried. But then in the distance she heard first quiet, and then more and more distinct clattering of hooves. And now the cart appeared. Has he really arrived? Didn't you lie? Barbara. Bruno immediately recognized her figure from afar and thought to himself with surprise that he had made a mistake. But no. What are you doing here? You just left. Bruno, is your proposal that you can stay in the village relevant? Barbara tried to squeeze out a smile, but it came out somehow crooked and askew. Yes, sure. I see you are alone here. There is no one else. Then get on the cart, and let's go. The man helped her sit more comfortably on the cart and lightly spurred his mare. Now they were driving in silence, not saying a word. And what could we talk about? Bruno understood that Barbara had not come here again out of a good life and asked to stay with him. And the woman felt uncomfortable explaining something along the way. Barbara, can I ask a question? Why did I come here? You know, your healer was right. And my husband is not just walking around, but he also managed to bring his mistress into our house, put her on the bed, and asked me to make them some soup.
Yeah, thought Bruno, this woman has nothing good. Apparently, she really didn't come here out of good happiness, but that means Elsa was really right. This woman is his destiny. That's exactly what she said in the evening, when Barbara had already left. And he drank quietly alone in his own kitchen.
You're still standing there drunk, Bruno. Elsa's voice sounded right next to his ear, causing the man to tremble so much that he almost spilled the glass of tincture. Ugh, Elsa. You walk like a cat. At least cough at the threshold for decency. What if I'm with a woman? Yes, with what woman? Except with this little white one. And the healer nodded at the bottle of cloudy tincture that stood in the very center of the table. You shouldn't get drunk. Look, you'll still sleep through tomorrow morning. Well, tomorrow will be a normal morning, that's all. That's not all, said the old woman. I had a vision that Barbara would arrive tomorrow. So you should be at the station as usual. Understood me? I understand. I haven't drunk my brains out yet. But why would Barbara come back? She didn't believe a single word you said. Well, whether you believed it or not, it's none of your business. But she will most likely believe her own eyes when she comes home and sees her husband in bed with his mistress. Are you sure about this? And if she doesn't see it, then what? She didn't even look in my direction. And you say that she will come to me? Let's argue. If he comes, you will take me as godmother to your child. Yes, deal. If so, then I will carry you in my arms for this. He hugged the old woman, and she patted him on the back and spoke quietly. Better stop drinking and go to bed. Tomorrow will be a new day and a new life. True, from the very morning Bruno kept doubting whether he should go to the station or not. After all, the witch did not receive on Mondays and the people knew it. But now maybe it's not worth going. Looking at his reflection in the mirror, the man ran his hand over his stubble. No, I'll probably go. Now I'll go and shave and go now. All this flashed through his head in a matter of seconds. And Bruno, quietly nodding at the mare, glanced sideways at Barbara. She too was silent, mentally recalling how she found her husband in bed and that his mistress turned out to be a Polish woman. Bruno, do you believe Eliza? Do you believe what she says? Why not believe? Just recently I couldn't even imagine that you would come, but now you're here. He wanted to say that she herself asked to stay with him, but he bit his tongue just in time. And I myself asked to live with you. Is that what you wanted to say, Bruno? If you don't want me to live with you, then stop your horse. I'll go back. No, Barbara, you definitely won't leave here now. And if you are embarrassed by the fact that you will live with me as a guest, then I can tell you right away, marry me, and you will be a full-fledged mistress in my house. The woman looked sideways at Bruno and was just about to say something when her mobile phone rang. Looking at the screen, Barbara picked up the phone. Yes, Mary. Harry, Barbara, where are you? Bruno has been calling me since the morning. He says you're missing. No, you are neither at work nor in your room, in the dorm. And now I'm going for the second round to the village where the healer Elsa lives. For the second round. How can we understand what is actually happening? Were you there or not? Was. But I didn't really like what you told me the first time. Oh, how can I tell you, Mary Pavlovna, your son definitely has a mistress, and I want to divorce him. But where are you now? I'm going to the village, and I'm thinking of staying here for a while. Are you sure about this? My mother-in-law understood that nothing could be solved by shouting and swearing, so she tried to speak calmly. Yes, just don't get me wrong. It's hard for me to forgive betrayal. I need to think and make a decision with a calm mind. That's right, Barbara. But please call me. Do not get lost. Of course, I understand that my son is not perfect, but I would not want to lose a daughter-in-law like you. I heard you, and thank you for everything that you have done and are doing for me. Barbara hung up the phone and looked into the distance. The first rays of the morning sun illuminated the wheat field, and a light breeze made the ears look like a gentle sea. This is the truth, how fate can put everything in its place. The mother-in-law turned out to be closer to her husband and mother, and the stranger simply took him in and sheltered him in his house. Did she, mother-in-law, call?
Bruno looked at the woman carefully, trying not to show his excitement.
Yes, she said that Anthony was looking for me. She probably asked you to come back? Oddly enough, but no. After all, he understands I don't have the character to forgive betrayal like that. But you, Bruno, are still ready to host a married lady. Ready. But may I ask, how long will this sweet lady remain married? Not for long. Just believe me, we need to think about the situation a little now. And in a few days I'll just file for divorce. That's all. Bruno wanted to ask what about us, but he bit his tongue and turned his horse towards his house. He opened the gate and led the horse into the yard. Then he helped Barbara bring things into the house and, pointing to a cozy back room, said, "This is my daughter's room. You can stay here as long as you want." "Do you have a daughter?" Barbara looked at the man in surprise. "Yes, I had a woman when I was young, but it probably didn't work out. But I don't abandon my daughter, I help her. And if you want, I can introduce her." Bruno's words startled her. But the woman just smiled and answered, "Yes, we should probably get to know each other, but a little later. And to be honest, Bruno, I don't even know how to react to your proposal." Which one exactly? To meet my daughter, or remain a full-fledged mistress in your house. He will only be glad of this. Elsa's words behind them made both of them flinch. You are back after all, Barbara. So I was right. Yes, and you were right. I wanted to come to you later, but I got ahead of you. Nothing. I always say what I see, and it always comes true. Anyway, on the occasion of your arrival, I brought you a cake. I baked it myself. Knew you'd be back, Barbara. Barbara looked carefully at a real masterpiece of culinary skill with pigtails, curls with 2 doves on top. Wow, just wedding. But we are not husband and wife yet. But you are a couple that fate brought together. And you shouldn't deny this. Bruno will make you feel good. But if in doubt, don't rush into a decision. Just wait and see, and your Anthony will show his true colors. And then you will finally make the right decision. Elsa turned around and went to the gate. And the man and woman stood at the porch of the house and, dumbfounded, looked after her. Yes, Barbara, and if you want, then come to my place for tea tonight with Bruno. Barbara nodded her head silently and turned her gaze to Bruno, who also looked at her incomprehensibly. Anyway, which have not be avoided. By evening, Barbara had gotten a little comfortable in the house, laid out her simple belongings, and having prepared dinner, sat down on the veranda. How do you like it, Barbara? In my house, if you need something, you always say, we won't buy it in our store. This way you can go to the city. I have a car in my garage. Do you have a car? What about the horse and cart? Why don't you drive a car? You see, this is a kind of production, an entourage or something, but nothing more. Believe me, Barbara, this is all the man gestured around the house and the farmstead with her predictions and help. You can be sure of this. Yes, I'll try. But Bruno, tell me, what did Elsa mean when she said that my husband would show his face?
But you can ask her this. It's time for us to get ready for a visit.
Here is the familiar little hut again. Grass is on the walls, sedge on the floor. Everything here breathed with a certain mystery, about which epics and fairy tales are written. It's so fairy tale-like here. Perhaps the only thing missing is a black cat.
But why is it not enough? I have one like this in my house. Apparently he just decided to go for a walk. Or, as always, he went out hunting for mice.
Wow. Elsa, can I ask a question? What did you mean when you said that my Anthony would show his true colors? But really, should I be afraid of physical harm from him? Or will Anthony, as always, limit himself to a verbal skirmish? Yes, you see, Barbara, your Anthony is not as simple as it might seem. But I won't tell you anything yet. You must see everything for yourself with your own eyes. But I hope he won't harm me. She really was scared. After all, you never know what you can expect from an angry husband. Don't worry, he won't cause any physical harm to you or anyone else. But you will see everything for yourself later. Barbara nodded her head, but the anxiety did not go away. The unknown scared her. But the woman's anxiety was also noticed by Bruno, who simply took her hand and, leaning towards her face, spoke quietly. Don't worry, Barbara. I'm also difficult and will always protect you. Do you understand me? His voice sounded different, not the same as always, but confident and tough. There was a sense of animal strength in him. This sent goosebumps down Barbara's arms, and looking at them, the woman noticed how the hairs stood on end. She simply nodded her head, mentally agreeing. But why lie to yourself? It was so nice when a man solves all your problems, when he takes responsibility for his own woman, home, and in general. But apparently Bruno's intonation somewhat frightened Barbara. And noticing the expression on her face, the man immediately spoke, quickly softening his intonation. Barbara, I'm sorry if I scared you, but I'm really not a mama's boy or some guy from the village. I have a higher education, 3 diplomas, and work in a hospital. As fate would have it, he even became a novice in a monastery. But now I live here. Wow. Wow. You, Bruno, have a biography. But Barbara still wanted to say something when at that moment she received a call. Yes, someone knows how to interrupt a conversation, the woman thought. But looking at the mobile screen, she sighed heavily. Well, yes, who else could call her? Faithful hubby Anthony, who apparently cooled down after a fit of rage and decided to dial it. Barbara, where are you? The once beloved husband asked without words of greeting. "Anthony, why do you need this?" "Well, you have your polished girlfriend, so live with her. I will file for divorce myself. You don't have to worry." "Yeah, there's really nothing to worry about. And will you also leave me the apartment, which, by the way, my parents bought?" "I'll leave it if the court agrees to give me a divorce." A minute of silence on the phone spoke eloquently. Anthony was calculating all the pros and cons, feverishly wondering what the catch was. "Barbara, tell me the whole truth. What's the catch? You are giving me the apartment just like that, without trying to defend it for yourself. I'm not as mercantile as you. Come on, how pious you are." The woman heard her husband's heavy, angry breathing on the phone and could not understand how until now she had not noticed all this, all his anger and greed and lust. God, how blind she was. "And why are you silent? Or do you have nothing to say? Just imagine, there is something. Why do you think we haven't had children until now?" "I wonder why. You shouldn't answer though." "My dear husband, it's all my fault. That's what you always said." "No, all this time I gave you one special herbal decoction, and thanks to it you could not get pregnant. And why? I didn't need a wife like you. You were picked up on the street like a puppy, warmed up and given a successful marriage. But why do I need a wife without family and tribe? A beggar who could not give anything to me and my children?" "Is that all you wanted to tell me?" said Barbara, surprised that she had not yet fainted from what she heard. "Yes," Anthony shouted into the phone. Barbara simply pressed the end button, not wanting to continue this conversation any further. She leaned her head against the warm wood of the house and closed her eyes. Lord, what an idiot and a brute she lived with all these years. And she firmly believed that he loved her, that everything would be fine with them. "Did your husband call?" Bruno looked at her carefully and nervously fingered a black rosary with a cross hanging on it in his hand. "Yes," he threatened, "and you are right, and Elsa. He gave me a very, very unpleasant surprise." So to speak, he opened his eyes and showed his own black insides. Elsa smiled and, raising an eyebrow, looked at the woman, as if asking, "And what did he tell you there?" Barbara sat with her eyes closed and didn't know whether to tell them or not everything that Anthony had told her. But all this put such pressure on her from within that she simply did not have the strength to remain silent. "Elsa, you can't imagine how hard my soul is right now. I just don't know how to live with this anymore. Tell me, maybe I can help you with advice. And I, if necessary, with my fists and a gun." Bruno sat closer to Barbara and took her hand in his. But the woman didn't even notice it. "You see, all this time while my husband and I lived, he slipped some herbs into my food or drink. I don't know where, and I couldn't get pregnant. And all this time, my husband bullied me and reproached me for being infertile, for not being able to consider myself a full-fledged woman and mother." A tear quietly rolled down her cheek, but only Elsa noticed her, who sat down next to her and quietly stroked her hand. "Nothing, Barbara, believe me, every poison has its own antidote. Me and Bruno will help you feel good again. Do you think I can have children? What are you saying? And you don't need to understand me. With these words I conjure fear and sadness. But Bruno will bring water from my stream and we will drink tea. And then everything will be fine with you. By the way, let's go to the forest today. Can you help me find a fern flower? Today is the night when your deepest desires can come true." An hour later, the company went to the local lake, where almost the entire village had actually gathered. Wow, Barbara thought, looking around. There were tents with benches and tables around the lake. A variety of foods were cooked over an open fire, and there were trays and refrigerators with drinks and sweets. There was no crowd of young people. Don't be surprised. We have ethno-tourism at the highest level. And my experience and knowledge help the villagers get on their feet, earn an honest living, and show guests a different side of village life, and ancient wisdom. Honestly, I couldn't even think. Barbara, we also have swings installed on the field. Let's go for a ride. Swing? Doom. The woman's surprise knew no bounds. Yes, these type of boats on high poles. Believe me, it's very exciting. He grabbed her hand and pulled her into the field, where indeed a high swing had already been installed, and people were crowding around it to take a ride with the breeze. Barbara and Bruno rode on boats, laughed like children, enjoying the wind in their hair, the night sky, and the fact that they could surrender to the holiday like this and not think about anything. And Barbara rejoiced like a child, not at all reproaching herself for being able to rejoice and enjoy freedom. I feel as good today as I have never felt in my life. And I'm not even the least bit ashamed of my actions, because I left my husband. I'm not even angry at him for his words, but for what he did. Because why? Bruno looked at her carefully and gently pulled her towards him, putting his arm around her shoulders. Because I'm finally free. Bruno leaned over and gently kissed her mulled wine-sweet lips, lightly and unobtrusively, trying not to frighten off such a moment of trust. The man was afraid that Barbara would push him away. But either nature or herbs or wine made her more pliable to her desires, which she always suppressed in herself, forcing her to respond to his kiss with a passionate and demanding kiss. Barbara, of course, I'm glad that you allowed me to kiss you. But let's not rush. And this is what a man tells me. It's strange, usually it's the partner who has to say it. But no, don't think anything like that. You are a beautiful woman. I like you very much. But I don't want you to regret your momentary weakness later. Barbara pulled away from Bruno but did not let go of his hand, but turned around and pulled him towards the lake. Then maybe we can go make wreaths and float them on the water. Let's go. They wove wreaths, threw them into the water, picked flowers and rejoiced at the night, like children lying on the grass and counting the stars in the sky. Good morning, Barbara. Bruno lay leaning on his hand and looked at her with a smile. Bruno, I hope you and I didn't sleep yesterday. I wanted to ask Barbara, but I didn't dare ask such a frank question. Weren't we asleep? No. You don't have to worry about this. We were by the river, weaving wreaths, counting the stars in the sky. You leaned on my shoulder and just fell asleep. Why didn't I bring you home? Well, because you asked me to take you here. Here is the answer to your question. How did we end up here? Yeah, I don't know, Bruno, what came over me yesterday. Probably your tea or local mulled wine. But I admit, it was the best day of my life. But Bruno, there is no need to spoil such a wonderful morning. Let's put this aside for a while. Then come on, get up. I'll prepare you a real rural breakfast at home. Oh, that already sounds great. Bruno helped his unexpected night companion get up and led her home again. They walked along a field path, smoothly turning into a rural road, and chatted about nothing. And Barbara more and more often caught herself thinking that she felt wildly, to the point of pain in her heart. She always wanted to walk like this, talk, and not think about anything. Barbara, what are you thinking about now? Bruno looked carefully into her face, hidden under the flowers of yesterday's flower. Yes, you just shine from the inside. Is it true? Yes, you know, Bruno, I want to tremble in my knees and just walk like that and not think about anything. Then I propose to meet the dawn in the field every morning. How do you like this idea? Unless, of course, you sleep until noon. No, and I don't sleep until noon. That's why I like the idea itself. And it's true. What can I say? Fate itself brought these two together. It was brought together in the most mysterious way when, a month after they met, Barbara and Bruno soon got married, and the local priest married them in an ancient wooden church, where many people from the village and surrounding towns came. This was the first wedding in this temple. And the clergyman himself said then, by combining this couple in a legal marriage, we launch into our hearts not only love, but also the piety of our Lord, love each other, be fruitful, and live happily ever after. Oddly enough, Barbara's ex-mother-in-law came to their wedding and was sincerely happy for her former daughter-in-law. She even asked Barbara for forgiveness when she was leaving and asked to come visit them. Things didn't work out for her son with Jadwiga. Anthony then took her to the station for the last time and asked, "Did you even love me?" Well, how can I tell you? Anthony probably loved her in her own way. But you yourself understand that you have nothing, because your parents gave all their property to Barbara. Why do I need this? If we had children, where would we live? In my apartment? Sorry, Anthony, but you can't build a family on such conditions. So the girl cheerfully kissed him goodbye on the cheek and jumped into her carriage, waving to him from the steps. Yeah, what a fool you were, Anthony. You lost everything you had, your wife who loved you, the opportunity to have children and a home, and his parents abandoned him. They simply stopped communicating and answering phone calls. But one fine evening this happened. Anthony, hi, this is Barbara. If you still remember. Anthony made me sweat and get goosebumps all over my body. Of course he remembered her and could not forget her. No matter how hard I tried, I immersed myself in my work. Drinking and partying, nothing helped. Hello, Barbara. Of course I remember hearing from my mother that you got married. Well, your free life didn't last long? Yes, not for long. That's not why I'm calling. Barbara thought for a minute whether she should have said this or not, but she still said, I want to thank you so much for bringing Jadwiga to our house, and I witnessed it. Otherwise, I would not have returned to this village, would not have decided to have a relationship with Bruno, and would not have gotten pregnant. Yes, Anthony, I am carrying twins under my heart, so thank you very much. From what he heard, Anthony's cheekbones twisted, they played with anger, but the man could not say anything in response. All this could have been his, but it never happened, and all due to my own stupidity. Is that all you wanted to tell me? Yes. Although no, I signed over the apartment that your parents registered in my name. So you can live in peace and build new relationships and tell her thank you very much. You can gloat. Jadwiga left me after a few days. Now I'm free like a bird. But when I meet her, I will definitely say your regards. Thank you, Anthony, and all the best to you. Barbara hung up, and Anthony just held the phone in his hand for a few more minutes and listened to the short beeps, not knowing how to react. No way. Barbara is happy. She has a new husband and 2 children, and he was left without a home and family. Even his relatives abandoned him, and he himself is to blame for this, because there is no one else to blame. But Bruno himself had a different opinion. Barbara, maybe you shouldn't have called him and told him all this. He gently hugged her shoulders, approaching her from behind. Bruno, you know, I've wanted to say this to his face for so long that I probably wouldn't be able to restrain myself. And as Elsa says, it's better to regret what you did than what you didn't do. As if your ex-hubby wouldn't do any harm. But you are with me. Barbara looked at her husband in bewilderment. With you. But Barbara, just understand, you can't always cause harm just by deeds. You can use an unkind word or a conspiracy. But that's it, you definitely got this from Elsa. Or maybe she has it too. But tomorrow I'll still go to her and let her give you a talisman. Which, I don't want your ex-husband to have any influence on you. He kissed his wife tenderly, stroked her rounded belly, and put his ear to it. Barbara, the children are already knocking their feet, asking to be brought into the world as soon as possible. And it's definitely a boy. By the way, what did we decide with the names? The woman smiled and looked at her husband. This issue has been on their agenda for a long time. And if they decided on the name for the girl Mary, in honor of the former mother-in-law, then they did not decide on the name for the boy. Let's ask Elsa. She will be our godmother, so let her give the boy a name herself. Barbara nodded her head in agreement with her husband and kissed him tenderly on the cheek. And really, is it worth arguing with the man you love when everything can be resolved with the help of a wonderful godmother? They stood on the shore of the lake and watched how the sun set in the field, how the winter sun hid behind the rare branches of still bare trees. Barbara was happy that now she had a person next to her who would not just say, I'm with you, but also protect her, lend her shoulder, and protect her from problems. And may everything be fine for everyone, even Anthony. Andrew walked briskly through the night streets of the city where his childhood and youth had passed. His heart was beating like a caged bird. Multicolored blotches flashed before his eyes, and his breath hitched, though he hardly felt. He wanted to be away from the restaurant sooner, where such a surprise awaited him. This trip was going to be a pleasant, easy one. A childhood friend, Kevin, had invited Andrew to the wedding. The man was surprised because he had long considered his friend a hardened bachelor. But then the wedding came up. Andrew was curious to see the woman who had managed to win over his freedom-loving friend. He was looking forward to seeing old friends, seeing his hometown, and reminiscing about the past. Of course, Andrew could not miss such an occasion. After all, it was a bright and warm event in a series of gray, everyday life. The man even took an unscheduled week's vacation at work to be in his former company. Andrew was a more than successful man, but he's had a hard time making it work. He lives and works in Moscow, managed to escape from the provincial town where he actually rushed to. But few people know that Andrew works on a rank-and-file position in not the most prosperous company, and every day spends at least 4 hours on the road to work and back. Because he lives far from the office, almost on the outskirts of the capital, in not the most prestigious neighborhood. His cramped two-bedroom has long been in need of repair, but Andrew does not want to get involved in this epic. Why? He's fine as he is. Lives alone, only sleeps at home. What single bachelor needs all this beauty? And he's not ready to spend a lot of money on repairs. His salary does not allow him to live in luxury and allow himself to excesses. Personal life does not add up either. There are, of course, temporary romances, but it's not serious. Andrew mainly attracts ladies who need a place to live. At his expense, they can save on rent until they get settled in Moscow. Andrew sees perfectly well the intentions of such women. Looks, words, actions, all this gives away their true goals. Unpleasant, of course, but probably by the age of 35, it's time to realize that perfect, pure love may not exist. Everyone in a relationship is pursuing their own interests. When you were young, it seemed that one day the perfect girl would meet on your way. Beautiful, loving, intelligent, sincere, household and caring, but at the same time self-sufficient and able to occupy yourself when you go out with friends. One who will adore her spouse and be his or her rock-solid support. With such smiling beauty, Andrew dreamed of building a family and living happily ever after. Remembering his dreams, Andrew was amazed at his naivety. There are no fairy tale women or perfect relationships, as indeed in situations when everything in life perfectly suits. This realization came with time, in worse, as appointments awaited him at every step. In work, personal life, everyday life. How many hopes and plans he had for New York. In his youth, it seemed that it was enough just to leave his hometown, and life will shine with bright colors. Beautiful girls, great opportunities, lucrative job offers, fun parties, new friends. In fact, everything turned out differently. A small two-bedroom on the outskirts, in an old house, far from civilization. And for this modest apartment, Andrew is not yet fully paid off. Relatives helped with the first installment, which in his hometown could be used to buy a spacious home and make a luxurious renovation. But in New York, it was only a fraction of the cost of an old apartment on the top floor of a house without an elevator. Nevertheless, at the beginning of his journey to the capital, Andrew was full of hope and felt happy to have finally broken free. It was breaking free. That's how he felt, believing that everything would work out properly now. Freedom strengthened the prospects that were opening up, making his head spin. Andrew was glad that he had managed to end his past life. It seemed to him that it was a prerequisite for starting a new life, like a rebirth. Andrew left his mother, grandparents, friends, and Alex behind in his hometown. His relationship with her was beginning to take a turn for the overly serious. The girl, Andrew, of course, good, pretty, modest, caring, but the strength of her feelings frightened the guy, and anyway, how many such years he still has ahead of him, not to take her with him to New York. In the end, Andrew quickly found a job. There were indeed many offers, but they were not as tempting as the guy imagined at home. Igor, however, was not discouraged. He needed money to live and pay the mortgage. In addition, it is necessary to gain experience somewhere, because everything is still ahead, except that more than 10 years have passed and nothing has changed dramatically. Andrew was still working in low-paid jobs. To climb the career ladder, you need connections or great brains, well as incredible efficiency, love of work, passion for the cause. Igor had none of these things. He served working hours in the office as a duty, received at the end of the month a salary, most of which was given to mandatory payments. Rent, loans, mortgages. The rest of it he pulled until the next paycheck. Andrew always liked beautiful girls, bright as stars with long, slender legs, shining huge eyes, self-confident, witty, ambitious. There were certainly plenty of them in New York, but Andrew was not attracted to them at all. What could attract a young beauty to a dull office plankton, living from paycheck to paycheck? What could he offer such girls? Back in his own town, Andrew had once been an eligible suitor, the grandson of the head doctor of the local hospital, a student at a prestigious university. He felt he was the best of the best there. He had a lot of friends. Girls were looking at him, but Andrew always dreamed of more. He dreamed of the big city, thought he was worthy of a much better and brighter life than the one he had in his hometown. Andrew often spoke contemptuously about life in the province, called his small homeland collective farms and swamps. He assured me that he would never stay here. But he didn't. What's the use? What did he accomplish? First of all, Andrew's years in the capital have made him a liability in the form of loans. It's going to take him a long time to pay them off, and the salary in New York is still much higher than in a small town. Andrew realized that if he returned home, he would not get out of debt, and there was no one to help him now. His grandfather used to be an upstanding man, a respected and well-known man in the city, head doctor of the local hospital, but now he is on a well-deserved retirement. Sick, old, weak grandfather himself requires attention and care. And secondly, well, how is it possible to return after Andrew assured his friends that life in a small town is not for him? After scornful words about his small homeland. Okay, let's be honest. After bragging to his acquaintances, to admit to the whole city his failure and failure to admit his own insignificance, well, no, Andrew could not do that. Especially in the eyes of his old friends and relatives, Andrew was quite a successful and established guy. He lives in Moscow in his own apartment, works as an economist. The man diligently created an image of a man who was very satisfied with his life. Even in social networks, he put up photos which, in his opinion, supported the status of a... It is funny, of course, but sometimes the owner of the firm where Andrew worked organized corporate parties for employees. And on Andrew's page, after such festivities, appeared photos from luxurious restaurants. Once Andrew's colleague came to work in an expensive foreign car rented from his brother. Andrew took selfies behind the wheel of the car and posted the photo in his profile that evening, laughing at himself. That sort of thing. Andrew was making it look like he had a life he never had, and he was getting tons of likes and comments from people he knew from the town. They were convinced that Andrew had it all worked out. The ambitious plans of his youth had come true, and Andrew was happy with that. But at least in the minds of his friends and relatives, he would be so successful and happy. Andrew grew up without a father. His mother gave birth to him, as they call it, for herself. Or to put it more simply and honestly, she fattened him up. Andrew was the fruit of a banal resort romance student and a young man who introduced himself as the owner of a small business. Who really was his father, Andrew did not know and believed that now he will never know. This man, he does not even suspect the existence of his son, and, of course, has probably already forgotten about the affair that happened so many years ago, or maybe he's not even alive at all. And then there's the mother. She knew nothing about her resort lover. It's simple. His mother did not plan a serious relationship with him. That's why she was not interested in the details of his life. She certainly didn't ask for his address and passport. She just wanted to have fun. She found herself away from the control and custody of strict parents, and in the end, it all turned out like this. Andrew was an unplanned but beloved child. His grandparents insisted that their daughter give birth. Even though she kind of wanted an abortion, Andrew suspected it was his grandfather who kept him alive. Grandfather, after all, he is so authoritative, reliable, correct, and it is very difficult to argue with him. It must have been hard for him to accept the fact that his daughter had fathered a child out of wedlock. And yet the grandfather coped and made such an important decision for the whole family. The grandfather's reward was a grandson. He had dreamed of a son all his life, but in the end he got 2 daughters. The older of them gave her father 2 wonderful granddaughters, but the youngest made the most pleasant and long-awaited surprise, gave birth, finally, to a boy. Andrew's childhood was bright and happy. He was surrounded by loving relatives. His mother, however, much attention to her son did not pay. She was working or trying to organize her personal life, but Andrew still felt her love. His mother often gave him toys, took him to amusement rides or to the movies. She was a celebratory person, cheerful, energetic, full of ideas and plans. His mother charged her son with optimism and love of life, and his grandparents loved him. Andrew later realized that his grandmother felt very sorry for him. But how can a boy grow up without a father? And his mother doesn't do much with him. He just shows up once in a while like a ray of light and then disappears again. That's why grandmother tried to compensate for the lack of parental warmth and cooked for him delicious dishes, and read bedtime stories to him, and walked with her grandson for hours around the city, patiently going around all the playgrounds with him. Grandma's warmth, unconditional love, and complete acceptance. No matter what Andrew did, she was always at his side, even if her favorite grandchild was at fault. If Andrew was involved in a fight, grandmother unconditionally considered the other party missing bully who dared to hurt a good boy. If the grandson got a D, grandma turned on the teacher with her prejudice. Andrew loved grandma too. It was nice to know that there was such a person in the world for whom the light in the window, the best, the most beautiful and smart. Andrew had a different relationship with his grandfather. He did not particularly encourage dabbling. He could shout at his grandson and even give him an easy backhand under the wailing and groaning of his wife. Grandfather set limits, and that was good too, because it paradoxically gave Andrew a sense of security. Grandfather was solid as a rock. His words carried weight. He often had heart-to-heart talks with his grandson on a variety of topics: friendship, love, studies, plans for life. Grandfather had such conversations with Andrew from an early age, and the boy loved these moments. And grandfather often took his grandson to work with him. There, the boy saw how respectfully other people treated his grandfather and felt proud of his relative. Andrew realized that his grandfather was doing a very important job and doing it well. People are grateful to him. Grandpa took his grandson fishing and into the woods, and sometimes they spent the whole day in the garage, going through the insides of an old car. Andrew suspected that his grandfather could have bought a newer car, but apparently the faithful Iron Horse was dear to him as a memory. The older relative tried to compensate Andrew for his father's lack of attention as best he could, and he did it well. Andrew adored his grandfather and as a child dreamed of being like him. When Andrew was about 6 years old, he first saw a famous rock band on TV. And the boy was so mesmerized by the spectacle that he did not even hear his grandmother calling him to lunch. From then on, the boy never parted with a plastic shovel. He held it in the manner of a guitar and sang, and danced just like the guys on TV. The adults laughed and clapped their hands. They were sure Andrew would outgrow his hobby. He didn't. At first, the boy just listened to rock songs. Then he started singing along. The grandmother was the first to notice that her grandson has an ear and voice and took him to music school. Within these walls, Andrew was disappointed, because he had imagined everything quite differently. He thought the school had a stage and men in jeans with guitars. But the boy sat down at the piano and forced to learn boring scales. It was unbearable. Andrew hated school after the first 2 or 3 lessons. Like grandmother, always soft and pliable, suddenly showed firmness. She intended to make a musician out of her grandson, as his teacher assured the woman that the boy has talent and Andrew's sense of rhythm is innate. It turned out that Andrew's ear is marvelous. But laziness, according to the teacher, spoiled everything. Grandmother did not want to ruin Andrew's talent, so she forced him for 3 years to go to the hated music school. And then the boy still rambled and, not without the support of his grandfather, left the dismal institution. His grandmother regretted it for a long time about his behavior. She had already seen her grandson in dreams on the posters decorating the city about the arrival of the great pianist. But this was not the scene Andrew had dreamed of. Grandfather, who saw and understood everything, gave his grandson a real beautiful guitar for the new year. And Andrew somehow slowly learned to pick up melodies. Something looked at his favorite performers, to something himself reached, and he practiced diligently with a self-study book. Without many-weight, such studies. Without many-weighted instruction, unnecessary lessons like solfeggio and literature, compulsory and exams. Now the boy spent hours in his room choosing compositions, and it worked. His father must have been musical, his grandmother sometimes said. "We've got a bear in our family. This one's a talent. You can see it in him." Andrew liked to imagine that his father was one of those rock musicians who packed million-dollar stadiums. He even looked for similarities between himself and the rock stars popular at the time. And he managed to find it. Once at school, Andrew studied not that very well, but without failures. His mother and grandmother initially dreamed that Andrew will follow in the footsteps of his grandfather, become a doctor. But by middle school, it became clear that the boy does not have the necessary aptitudes and abilities. Grandfather did not worry about it at all. He believed that everyone has his own way, and the task of adult relatives is to help the child to determine the future, to recognize his talent, which can later turn into a profession. None of the adults took his guitar playing seriously. That's why one day at the family council it was decided that Andrew would become an economics student. Why, the profession is promising. Monetary, the very thing for a guy. Andrew didn't mind, simply because he himself had no ambitions and plans for the future. An economist as an economist sounds kind of good. It's better to study at university than to go to the army. And in general, student life seemed to Andrew something like an endless holiday, a party, new friends and girlfriends. I can't wait. Andrew liked it at university. There seemed to be less control at once. It seemed that all the relatives suddenly recognized the only grandson and son as an adult. Grandfather even began to give more money for pocket money. Beautiful. Everything was exactly as Andrew had imagined. Parties, hanging out in rented apartments with visiting students, going to nightclubs. That's where the guy's guitar skills came in handy. It was great to sit in someone's kitchen and sing funny or even hooligan songs. Andrew, guitarist, was always the center of attention and was very proud of himself. Girls began to look at him, a good-looking, cheerful guy from a good family. At school, Andrew was somehow not distinguished by popularity, but at the university suddenly became an enviable groom. Of course, the guy took full advantage of this, had affairs, enjoyed his youth and freedom. Once, walking through the night city, a group of friends led by Andrew was in a rock bar. The guy did not realize that in his town there is such an institution. The bar was located in the basement of one of the houses in the center of the city. Unremarkable sign, minimal advertising. But inside it was a real treasure. Several not too spacious, cozy rooms with soft, comfortable chairs and photos of rock musicians on the walls, a long counter with high chairs and a stage with a microphone in the largest of the rooms. Local musicians and bands and soloists performed there every night. They played and sang both well-known songs and compositions of their own composition. Some kind of special atmosphere reigned here. The old-timers of the bar seemed to have known each other for a long time and formed a single, coherent organism. Andrew immediately wanted to become a part of it. This was the very element he dreamed of immersing himself in. From that moment on, Andrew became a frequent guest of the bar. He, catching his breath, watched the musicians' performances and then applauded them, making his palms literally burn with zeal. Together with everyone, the guy sang along with the performers, sometimes even allowed himself to dance, depending on the mood and atmosphere. Gradually, Andrew became like a native in the bar. He made friends with the musicians, and sometimes he was even invited on stage to perform between numbers, playing for the customers. Andrew felt a back wave of energy from the audience. He liked it incredibly much. The guy aspired to become part of some musical group. After all, by this time, he had already had time to get acquainted with a considerable number of local performers. Performing concerts as part of a rock band had been his dream since childhood. But there were no offers of cooperation, and when Andrew himself tried to offer his services, he was always very politely and tactfully declined so as not to hurt his feelings. It seems that Andrew lacked some defining quality to realize his dream. Perhaps charisma, talent, or all at once. He had to accept the situation. But the musicians of the bar were still idols in his eyes, unattainable heights. He liked to be among them, to listen to their conversations, to help with preparation for performances. And it was in this bar that he met Alex. Andrew still remembered that evening, the last days of May, the time of university credits. As always, he was struggling because of his carelessness. During the whole semester, he neglected his studies, and on the eve of the session, he urgently began to try to catch up, to teach, to pay for retakes, and even to work off some debts. The teacher, economic theory, agreed to give admission to the session to careless students in exchange for the repair of his classroom. Andrew single-handedly spent an entire day doing this work. The unaccustomed physical labor left him with aching legs and back. But the credit book now bore the precious, much-needed instructor's signature. After a hard day, Andrew decided to relax in his favorite rock bar. He went there finding himself alone. All his friends were busy. Someone went on a date because it was Friday. Someone was studying hard for a test, but Andrew wasn't upset. He had a lot of acquaintances at the rock bar, so he wouldn't be bored. No sooner had Andrew crossed the threshold than he was greeted by Ben, a familiar regular. He and a couple of friends occupied a corner table in the so-called sand room. Andrew gladly joined them. The evening in the company of friends promised to be rich. Talking, joking, exploring the depths of life. However, everything changed with the appearance of Alex in the hall. A short, thin girl was dressed in a waitress uniform. Black short shorts, the same black t-shirt, a long gray apron, and a name tag on her chest. Her long brown hair was gathered into a high ponytail, and her face was adorned with a minimum of makeup. Indeed, she didn't need it. Black, widely spaced eyebrows, long eyelashes of the same color, peachy skin, and eyes of an unimaginable light turquoise color. It was this unusual combination of colors that caught Andrew's attention. "That's the new waitress," Just started yesterday, Ben mumbled, noticing Andrew's gaze. Cute, I agree. Andrew nodded absent-mindedly. All his thoughts turned to the new waitress. He couldn't figure out what it was about her that had caught his eye. Yes, she was pretty, but he had met prettier girls. Some might say that she was too thin, as they say there's nothing to fight with. But Andrew didn't care about that. His eyes couldn't take his eyes off her. He couldn't tear himself away from her smile. It was radiant, yet humble, imbued with warmth. That smile lit up her face, making it even more attractive. It seemed to Andrew that he wanted to see that smile always. Moreover, he longed to be the one who caused it. He had never had that feeling before. That night, Andrew didn't find the courage to talk to the girl. It was not like him, because lately, the guy had been actively socializing and making new acquaintances. At school, he was really withdrawn and uncommunicative, but with the passage of time, everything changed. Now he had a pretty good experience in socializing. Still, when he was around a new waitress, he felt insecure again and became unusually quiet. One day, Andrew gathered all his courage and came to the bar with the sole purpose of talking to Alex. That night, he came alone, without his friends, to whom he had taken himself to indulge in a quick state of economy class. Alex seemed tired or sad. At that moment, one of the visitors, not a regular guest but a casual passerby, expressed his displeasure. He complained that Alex had brought the wrong beer he had ordered, which caused him to complain loudly. The guest insisted on his own, refusing to accept the drink he ordered. In this situation, Alex looked confused. After all, she was now to return the drink, which was certainly unpleasant to admit in front of the receptionist. When lady, put that beer on my tab, Andrew stepped in, to Alex's relief. And for this young man bring what he ordered and paid for. Alex gave Andrew a grateful smile that warmed his heart. He was happy to help the girl and support her in some way. That evening, although they couldn't talk much because of the influx of guests, Andrew and Alex exchanged jokes and smiles. Something special was brewing between them, and the guy could feel it. Alex was not indifferent to Andrew either, and it was adorable. Unfortunately, the hectic work on the weekend left no time for talking because the waitress was too busy. When the end of the shift came, Andrew waited for Alex and offered to walk her home. It turned out that she lived only a couple of blocks away from the bar. The young people, holding hands, walked slowly through the busy city streets. They felt happy and peaceful at this quiet evening hour. They were silent at first, and it was not a tense, oppressive silence, but relaxed and calm. Neither Alex nor Andrew felt a shadow of embarrassment or awkwardness. Then suddenly, both of them started talking. At first, they discussed the previous evening and the performance of a local rock band, which consisted of high school graduates. Alex and Andrew agreed that the young musicians had everything ahead of them if they continued in the same vein. Finally, Andrew ventured into a more personal conversation. "Do you have someone?" he asked. "No, I'm single." Alex answered quickly. "And you?" Andrew couldn't answer this question unequivocally. He always had meetings, and now he, you could say, was dating a girl from the parallel group. A few dates had already taken place, but for Alex's sake, he wouldn't hesitate to give up all of them. Andrew was more and more attracted to this girl. "Tell me about yourself, please," he asked. "I want to get to know you better." For Andrew, it was a period of unknown sensations. He was happy and confused at the same time. Alex told about her life simply and sincerely. The manner of her speech, the calm and gentle timbre of her voice, the expression of her face, all this attracted Andrew incredibly. He liked everything about her, absolutely everything. It turned out that Alex was born and grew up in a village, almost 100 kilometers away from here. This cozy and quiet corner was not at all adapted to the life of young people. After finishing 9 grades, Alex went to the nearest city for She entered a teacher's college. The choice of the profession of a teacher of junior classes happened not by the call of the heart, but because of the need to make a choice. After receiving her diploma, she tried to get a job in her specialty, but after a few months she realized pedagogy is not her way. Alex shared her memories. "I could not convey to these little people how to solve examples or write essays, although I can do it all perfectly well. But I couldn't teach and interest the kids. It's one thing to study in college and another to practice. It's heaven and earth." Alex didn't want to take on such responsibility, afraid to let the children down, to discourage them from learning. So she quit. She then worked for a while in a private developmental center. A young, pretty girl with a pedagogical education was welcomed with open arms. It was quite different from school. Here, it was not so scary to make a mistake or fail, and I always liked to take care of the kids myself. But then the center went bankrupt and closed. Alex found herself on the street. So I saw an ad for a waitress in a bar. So I answered it. "I'm so glad your center closed," Andrew admitted. "Because if it hadn't, we never would have met." Andrew and Alex began dating. Quiet, modest Alex with a dazzling smile and short stare finally won the young man's heart. And she herself, Andrew saw, felt, sensed it. Alex loved him with all her heart, with all her soul. She did everything to make Egior feel happy around her, even to the detriment of his desires and leisure. Andrew moved into Alex's rented apartment very quickly. They started living together. Andrew's relatives were not too happy with this fact. But what could they do? Andrew was already a very mature guy. What he wants to do, he does. Andrew was finishing his studies at the university. Alex was still working as a waitress. Her salary, his scholarship, plus monthly financial support from relatives made it so that there was enough money for the young people. Andrew next to Alex rested his soul. He felt that this girl accepted him with all his shortcomings. Moreover, she even liked these disadvantages, seeing in them, paradoxically, pluses. What eyes did Lyra look at him with what attention she caught his every word, and how many compliments Igor received when he played for his girlfriend on the guitar and sang to her. Next to Alex, Andrew felt like someone incredibly necessary, important, successful, almost perfect. It was very pleasant. And then Andrew didn't understand why. Everything started to change. Not all at once, but slowly, gradually. At first, Alex's care stopped warming his soul. Andrew somehow got used to her adoration, and Alex made him his favorite toast for breakfast, tried to please him with something special for dinner. And somehow it happened that the guy started to take it all as a norm. Alex didn't evoke the same feelings in him anymore. Admiration, interest, all of that disappeared. At first, Alex seemed a mystery to Andrew, so beautiful, quiet, modest. But her eyes gave away her bright nature. It's an exciting combination. But in time, the guy found out that there was nothing so special about Alex, an ordinary girl, even boring a little. Andrew, on the other hand, has always been attracted to extraordinary personalities. He was afraid of mediocrity, grayness, ordinariness. He even had his own idol, Samuel. He was about 10 years older than Andrew. By the way, Samuel had graduated from the same school Andrew had gone to. But to go to vocational school, where the road lay the road of most third graders in those years, the guy did not. He formed his own band and rushed to New York. There Samuel made a dizzying career. No, he didn't become a star of the first magnitude, but he still gained a certain fame. His rock band songs were played on the radio. The musicians gave concerts all over the country and even had their own army of fans. Samuel possessed a sharp mind and mad charisma. Andrew knew him personally. Samuel often came to their town because his parents lived here, and every time he went to the rock bar, where he was always a favorite guest, talking to old friends, listening to local musicians. Everyone here knew Samuel and loved him. Andrew considered himself a fan. He liked everything about the man. The open smile, the way he talked, the steady gaze. Samuel had amazing eyes, sad and thoughtful. He seemed to see through everyone he talked to with those eyes. Andrew wanted to be like Samuel. He even tried to imitate him, but he quickly realized that he couldn't do it. Samuel was a unique product, a star, a soloist, a leader. That night, Andrew went into the bar where Alex worked to meet some friends and listen to a new rock band. According to the stories of acquaintances, the newcomers showed great promise. The evening went on as usual, and close to midnight, Andrew felt some excitement in the... When he turned around, he saw them, Samuel and his buddies. Samuel was heading to his favorite table, nodding politely to his acquaintances. Andrew rejoiced. What luck! It looked like there would be no boredom today. Samuel was a man of celebration. Andrew decided that he would talk to Samuel today, secretly. In the back of his mind, Andrew still cherished the hope that one day Samuel would help him with his career, introduce him to the right people, and maybe even invite him to his band, at least as a backup, not as a core member. Samuel was living the life Andrew dreamed of. Touring, performing, rehearsing, partying, socializing with interesting people, beautiful girls, and, most importantly, the stage. Samuel literally gathered stadiums, excited crowds of people. Thousands of throats were singing along to him, and all eyes were fixed on him admiringly. If that's not happiness, what is? As Andrew finished his final year of university, it was as if he realized that he was no rock musician, that it might be too late to start. But every meeting with Samuel awakened his dream, gave him food for thought and a tiny ray of hope. Samuel was a risk-taker. After high school, he didn't continue his studies, but risked everything to pursue a career in music. And he'd been successful. Andrew sometimes wished he had been brave enough to take such a step. When Alex was serving Samuel's table, she smiled at him just like all the other customers. But Andrew's eyes were now fixed on his idol, full of hesitation and unspoken aspirations. He looked at her and occasionally said a word or two to the girl. Andrew didn't hear these phrases, but judging by the expression on Alex's face, it was something pleasant. Andrew, to his surprise, suddenly realized that he didn't like seeing his girlfriend chatting nicely with Samuel, and this was clearly not about jealousy. Andrew realized that Samuel was surrounded by beauties of all sorts, ready to do anything for him. Why would he want a country girl, Alex? Yes, he did. Now that Andrew had lived with her for a few months, he could see that. There was nothing special about her looks. The guy himself didn't understand why he was attracted to her. Andrew was uncomfortable with the fact that he was not the one chatting sweetly with the star. He had to wait patiently for a convenient moment, while Alex was calmly talking to Samuel right now and doing it so casually and naturally, as if she didn't realize who was in front of her. Or maybe she really didn't. A few more hours passed. Andrew decided that it was time to talk to his idol and headed to his table. At the same moment, Alex rushed to Samuel with an order, and this collision inevitably happened to Andrew. No, Alex held the beer glasses. Nothing even spilled out of them. The girl's good reaction saved the situation, but Andrew still couldn't resist an irritated remark. An elephant in a china shop. This expression flew out of his mouth automatically, the same words his mother used to bail him out with when he dropped or broke something. Alex was embarrassed. She was uncomfortable that Andrew was emphasizing the attention of those present on her blunder. If it weren't for his caustic remarks, perhaps no one would have noticed anything. Well, why would you do that? Samuel intervened, smiling encouragingly at Alex. What kind of elephant is it? It's a very sweet and fragile young lady. Andrew looked angrily at Alex. After these words of Samuel, she suddenly became even more annoyed with him. The girl, sensing this, backed off. The rest of the evening went great. Andrew had a great time in the company of Samuel and his buddies. It was interesting to listen to their stories about their turbulent youth and concerts in the capital. What a lot of trouble they got into in their time. You could make a whole movie. Andrew liked to feel himself a part of this company, even if only for one evening. These people lived bright, loud, and laughed heartily. Alex's shift was over. She walked over to Andrew, calling him home. Usually they always came back from the bar together. He just waved her off. He couldn't be bothered with her right now. Is that your girlfriend? Samuel asked her. More like an admirer, Andrew said, not caring a bit about Alex's feelings. She was standing right next to him, and she'd heard everything. But the guy didn't care about that. He didn't want Sokolovsky to find out that Andrew was in a serious relationship with a waitress. You're lucky. I wish I had a groupie like you, Samuel said, winking at Alex. She smiled sadly and went to the staff room to change. She was already very tired and wanted to get home as soon as possible. Andrew showed up at the apartment where he had been living with Alex for months. Early in the morning, he thought that Alex would give him a scandal, or at least demand an explanation. He behaved with her very ugly. He called her an elephant and didn't admit to others that she was his girlfriend. But Alex herself looked guilty. She didn't say a word to Andrew. And then, when he spoke up, she acted like nothing had happened. She looked at the guy with the same love, tenderness as before, and cared for him the same way. Alex's admiration and attention, which before were perceived as a gift of fate, now irritated and seemed to be the girl's advantages recently turned into her disadvantages. Care into obsession, unnatural beauty into rustic simplicity, modesty into stiffness. And yet Andrew was in no hurry to part with Alex. He was comfortable with her. Alex provided him with lodging, cooked delicious meals, even ironed his shirts. And at the same time, she didn't control every step of the guy as his relatives did, for example. She didn't demand reports, didn't limit him, didn't blow his brains out with talk about the future. With her, Andrew lived much freer than in his native house with his grandmother, grandfather, and mother. But Andrew dreamed of more. He saw himself as a successful, established guy, next to whom a bright girl with a model appearance, not Alex from the village. The guy was looking forward to graduating from university to finally move to a big city and start a new life in the future. He didn't see Alex around him. She was just a way station for him, nothing more. But Andrew's plans were almost ruined by a ridiculous accident. "We need to have a serious talk." These were the words Alex once met Andrew from the university. He had just sat through 5 consecutive classes. Accordingly, he had neither strength nor desire to communicate with the girl. "Okay," Andrew sighed. He realized that he had no way out. I'm expecting a baby," Alex bribed with a look. She was obviously feeling very embarrassed. Andrew felt like he'd been doused with a bucket of cold water. "What do you mean?" "I don't understand." "What's there to understand?" "It's simple. I'm expecting a baby. Are you sure about that?" Andrew asked with hope in his voice. "I can't be more certain." "That's a twist." "What about New York? What about Andrew's plans and dreams?" Now it was all over. Andrew tried to talk Alex into terminating the pregnancy. He told her it was too soon for them to be parents. A baby needs a grown-up mom and dad, and they're just kids. "I'm not ready," the boy honestly admitted. "What kind of father am I? I haven't even finished university yet." "I understand everything," Alex sighed heavily. "You don't have to worry. The girl looked so unhappy, so confused. And how could she be alone? Andrew knew perfectly well that Lyra couldn't handle it. He also knew that he wouldn't leave her now, or rather, he wouldn't abandon his child. Ever since he was a child, he had heard unflattering things about his own father. This man could not have known about his son's existence at all, and still turned out to be a scoundrel for not taking part in his upbringing. His grandfather, mother, grandmother, all together they managed to firmly hammer into Andrew's head a simple rule. You cannot abandon their children under any circumstances. Anyone who does so is unworthy of respect, love, and a happy life. It's the gravest sin a man can commit. And now Andrew finds himself in almost the same situation as his father once was. He is pregnant with a girl with whom he was just having fun, not planning a serious relationship. Only unlike his father, Andrew will not be able to dissolve in the vast expanse of his homeland, and he will not escape the consequences. No, of course, Alex won't go after him. She's not lying when she says that she's going to raise the child, but Andrew's conscience won't allow him to remove himself from the situation. "Well then, we'll get ready for the wedding." Andrew sighed and squeezed out a semblance of a smile. "Well, now we can't keep water in a sieve. We'll have to adapt to new circumstances." If you think about it, Alex wasn't the only one to blame for the situation. He, Andrew, had a part in it. Alex, of course, is not the limit of his dreams, but it is possible to live with her. She's economical, quiet, caring. Probably a good mother, too. And New York? It can wait. It's not going anywhere. Andrew's going to get his way. The boy honestly tried to console himself with these thoughts. So what if it's a baby? The main thing is that it should be born in marriage. Decency will be observed. And then you can get a divorce. And realize the old plans. You'll have to pay alimony for 18 years. But that's no problem. Andrew will have such an income that these mandatory deductions will not do him any good. Alex put her arms around Andrew, pressed herself against him. "I knew you were reliable and that you could be trusted." Earlier such words filled Andrew with energy and joy. But now, hearing them from Alex, the guy felt only heaviness. Instead of being happy about her trust, Andrew felt as if he had an anchor tied to his leg. He remained silent. Andrew introduced Alex to the in-laws. It was inevitable because of the upcoming wedding. Alex easily won their hearts, especially her grandmother, who never tired of repeating that Andrew was extremely lucky. But the more people around him rejoiced at the upcoming event, the more he felt trapped. Both his dreams and plans for a new life somewhere far away from here seemed shattered. All because of Alex, because of this unexpected pregnancy and imminent wedding. Now that he had finally received his cherished diploma, instead of striving for new horizons, he found himself bound by circumstances here in this small town. Alex was still working at the bar, and Andrew had decided to take a short vacation after his studies. He knew he had the responsibility of supporting a family ahead of him when Alex went on maternity leave. He reasoned that he was entitled to a short break before a new phase in his life. At the rock bar, where he now spent more and more time with friends, Andrew looked enviously at the young musicians. He realized that many of them could stay in this forgotten town forever, and some, like Samuel, had great futures ahead of them. Watching them, Andrew realized that he could have done things differently with his life. A man only lives once, and he doesn't have time for unloved causes and people. But commitment seemed to hold him captive like a snare. In the back of his mind, he wanted to scream in despair, seeing his prospects in life not working out the way he wanted it to. But his friends did not guess anything. Andrew skillfully hid his true feelings. They thought the guy was just a little nervous about getting married and having a baby. That's normal. Andrew didn't try to change their minds, suffering alone and desperately hoping that things could still catch up, not now, later, in a couple years. His plans weren't overridden, just put on hold for the time being, as long as this swamp doesn't swallow it up. It was on one of those nights at the bar, when Alex stayed home and Andrew enjoyed some freedom, that he met Scarlett. Tall, dazzlingly beautiful, long hair falling in waves down to her waist, tight jeans revealing her flat stomach. She showed up surrounded by her girlfriends. They were also pretty girls, but all their virtues paled against Jean's beauty. Andrew hadn't taken his eyes off her since she appeared in the hall. He was not the only one, by the way. His friends had already left, but Andrew was still sitting at the table, drinking beer and watching. He liked everything about her. Her smile, her loud laughter, her gestures. Scarlett was clearly a leader among her friends, and in general in life, it seems. The girl caught Andrew's eye a couple of times, and then a small miracle happened. She invited him to her table. Most of her friends had already left by that time. 2 silent girls remained, who did not interfere with the conversation between Scarlett and Andrew.
In the course of the conversation, it became clear that the young men had much in common. Scarlett was a couple years younger than Andrew and had also been raised without a father. Grandmother and mother insisted that the girl after school entered the law school of the local university, and Scarlett herself, as long as she can remember, dreamed of becoming an actress. She was attracted to the stage, creative environment, metropolitan life.
"You're really going to be a great actress," Andrew assured the new acquaintance sincerely. "With that kind of appearance, terrific. You'll have directors fighting over you." "Thank you." Scarlett smiled without the slightest embarrassment. "I think so too. But I wasn't ready to argue with my mom and grandma at that age. Not like now." Scarlett had listened to her older female relatives at first, and then as she grew older and stronger, she declared that she was an adult and would no longer allow herself to be manipulated and in charge of her own life. "Anyway, today I picked up my documents from uni. I'm not going back there again. In a couple of days, the train, and I'll leave for New York forever. Even if I don't become an actress, I'm not coming back here again." Andrew looked admiringly at the girl. How wonderful she is. Scarlett, unlike him, didn't betray her dream despite external pressure. She wasn't afraid to drop out of college and go to Newark into the unknown. She's like Samuel in that way, and Scarlett is bound to win. With that kind of looks, character, and assertiveness next to this girl, Andrew suddenly thought himself worthless and cowardly. But this unpleasant feeling did not last long because Scarlett suddenly kissed Andrew. Andrew was dizzy with surprise. Is this for real? Such an amazing girl liked him?
"You're awesome," Andrew informed Scarlett, pulling her slightly away. Huge brown eyes resembled 2 dark eyes. Someone could so easily drown in them.
"Why don't you keep me company? Come with me to New York. It feels like you're cramped in this city too. It'll be easier on the 2 of us." Andrew was dumbfounded and stared at his beautiful interlocutor. She sensed him so subtly, knew everything about him at once. "That's amazing." "Yes, of course," he nodded. "I'm with you." The moment Andrew said it, he genuinely thought he'd deal with problems like Alex and the wedding. He'd figure something out later. Well, he couldn't say no to such an amazing girl. Andrew might never meet another girl like her again. Probably never, because there's definitely no one else like her. That night, Andrew left the rock bar with Scarlett. She was driving her own old foreign car that her grandfather had given her for going to law school. Scarlett drove the car delightfully, beautifully. Andrew admired her confident movements and slim profile all the way. And now they were outside the city, in some deserted field, a deserted place. Scarlett stopped the engine, turned to Andrew and smiled. How could they resist? They met the dawn, lying in each other's arms on the sprawled-out seats. But that moment Andrew had no doubt. He would break up with Alex. He wouldn't give up the baby, of course, but there would definitely be no wedding. Telling Alex the truth wasn't easy at all, but Andrew wasn't going to cheat either. Why is that? He's not doing anything wrong. He met someone else, fell in love. That's just the way it happens. Andrew isn't Alex's property. He's a free man who's free to do with his life as he pleases. But Alex looked at Andrew with eyes that held hope, adoration, love, and tenderness. Looking into those devoted eyes, it was hard to tell the truth. Andrew felt like the ultimate scoundrel as he directly shared the news with his ex-fiancée. Alex, it's like she passed away, as if Andrew's words had caused her physical pain. Tears came to her eyes. Are you in a hurry? You don't know this Scarlett at all, do you? Beautiful girl, you're young. I can understand it all. A fling. But why take it out on me? If you want New York so badly, let's go together. There's nothing keeping me here anyway. Andrew felt anger boiling up inside him. That woman doesn't understand anything at all. He wants to go to New York to start a new life, the one he's dreamed of for so long. Maybe even make it as a rock musician. If it doesn't work out, he'll work in his newly acquired specialty. New York is a city of opportunity. No way he wouldn't have the load of an obsessive Alex, and he certainly didn't need a baby there. Alex cried, begged, apologized. Andrew never realized why. The guy was angry, insulted the girl, trying to hurt her. He realized that he was being cruel to Alex, but angry words were his way to break the connection with the annoying girl, to turn her away from himself. And so, Andrew found himself on a new round of his life adventures, leaving the familiar world, hopes and perhaps illusions for the dream of a future which he imagined much brighter and more intense. At the same time, his actions and decisions were not exempt from the guilt and burden of responsibility he felt toward the child. Andrew tried to convince himself that his decision was not an escape, but a step toward finding himself, toward being able to live the life he chose for himself, not the one chosen for him. However, the road to self-discovery and self-realization is rarely easy and cloudless. He had to go through trials and possible loneliness, being away from his familiar surroundings, from the sometimes heartwarming comfort of home, relationships in which, despite conflicts and disappointments, there were moments of sincerity and warmth. And the journey into the unknown with Scarlett was full of expectations and hopes. Common dreams and goals brought them together. But only time would tell if they would be able to pass all the obstacles together, if they would retain the strength and devotion to each other that seemed so obvious and unshakable at the beginning of their journey together. Imagining what will become of his life in a few years is a kind of mental test for Andrew, a test of maturity and the ability to take responsibility not only for his own life, but also for those he leaves behind. Perhaps there will always be a place in his heart of regret for the path he has chosen, and at the same time, pride in the courage to live his own way.
One of the most difficult questions Andrew finds himself facing is how to be a good long-distance father and how to stay connected to his child despite the circumstances. He envisions his future in the big city as a time of great opportunity, but also as a challenge in which he will have to learn how to combine personal aspirations with caring for his loved ones.
Andrew leaves behind not only the past, but also a piece of his heart, with the hope that in time he can find a way to reconnect with its inhabitants without losing himself and his dreams. The grandfather put aside a tidy sum of money for his grandson's account each year. It was, in his opinion, the necessary startup capital for every man. And now, when this money was needed, it came in handy. With this money, Andrew was able to rent an apartment for himself and Scarlett. They lived on it for the first time, while they still had to find a job. His grandfather, grandmother, and mother constantly sought to contact Andrew. They were probably anxious to express their dissatisfaction with his decision. It seemed to them that they could somehow influence the situation, maybe even force him to return home. However, the young man ignored these attempts at communication. He explained everything to his relatives in a letter and preferred not to have any conversations with them until they were calmer. Time will sort things out. After I get a job and get settled, I'll have a chance to do something nice for them. We'll talk then, Andrew reasoned. Scarlett thought Andrew was doing the right thing. Often parents and relatives, without even realizing it, put obstacles in our way. They try to force us to live according to their ideas, to conform us to their expectations. But we are not their property. Each of us has the right to make our own lives. Andrew fully supported Scarlett's every word. Unfortunately, their relationship didn't last long. Soon Scarlett found a rich sponsor in the capital and immediately left Andrew for him. Such a betrayal caused Andrew great pain. He was sure that he had found his only one who understood him like no one else. It seemed to him that together they could overcome all difficulties. But that's not what happened. Nevertheless, it was impossible to give up. It was necessary to take measures to settle in a new place and find a better paid job. Coming back was out of the question. After a month and a half of fruitless searching, Andrew finally got lucky. He was hired as a junior economist in a company that, although not particularly successful, had stability. The guy took it as the start of his way to a successful and prosperous life. However, more than 10 years have passed, and there were no significant changes. Andrew still occupied not the most prestigious position and practically did not move up the career ladder. Prospects seemed rather dim. Nevertheless, when he got the job, he still called his mother, ready for a serious conversation. He expected reproaches and possible demands to return, but his mother's reaction was unexpected. She wondered how he could have done this, not only to them, but to Alex. His relations were predictable, but his mother's next words shocked Andrew. Alex was so distraught over the alleged betrayal that she lost her baby, ended up in the hospital. She was barely saved, and then Andrew learned that calls had been made to inform him of Alex's condition, but he had never answered. This news stunned him. Despite everything, learning about the loss of his child did not make him feel relieved. On the contrary, it triggered a painful mixture of feelings: disappointment, pain, and longing.
Strangely enough, Andrew was able to get through it. Now it seemed to him that it was even easier to turn the page and start life anew. Andrew worked hard, saving money. His life was full of reports and traveling from the office to home. He had no time for entertainment, new acquaintances, and even less for relationships with girls. The guitar, which he once loved, was now covered in dust in the corner, as there was no time to play, and most importantly, no desire.
After a couple of years, Andrew managed to take a mortgage on a small apartment in an old house in a remote area without repairs, but his own. Relatives helped with the down payment. The guy sincerely rejoiced at this achievement, believing that the beginning has been made. But again, time passed and nothing changed. Andrew lived in a tiny 2-bedroom on the outskirts of the capital, spending a lot of time on the road to work, pulled money from paycheck to paycheck, saved on everything, and only in social networks on his pages carefully created the image of a successful man. It seemed to be working out pretty well. Andrew knew that his friends and relatives from his hometown were watching him. Let them think that their fellow countrymen had succeeded. Andrew's personal life didn't work out. No, he had the occasional fling, but these ladies were all the same. They were from out of town like Scarlett. They needed a place to stay for a while. Andrew's apartment was used as a staging post. The man was well aware of that, and now he remembered Alex with longing and nostalgia. Her care, tenderness, love, sensitivity, attention, respect. Next to her, Andrew felt like a king. She gave him the feeling of wings behind his back. And the others, they were always just using Andrew. The man understood this perfectly well and agreed. Where could he go? Then, in his youth, Andrew thought that he would have many more like Alex. Only with the years he realized that strong feelings and sincerity in relationships, a great rarity, but nothing could be taken back. Andrew was very happy to receive a call from his old friend Kevin. They had been together since high school and until Andrew left for New York. Life, of course, divorced the buddies in different directions, but they were still connected by many things. Warm memories, shared childhood and youth. All this does not disappear without a trace. Now it turns out Kevin has decided to settle down after all. He is about to have a wedding, and he invites to the celebration of a childhood friend who now lives in New York. But Will the Muscovite in his busy schedule will find time for an old friend. It's been ages since we've seen each other, and this is the occasion, Kevin said. This half-joking phrase has once again convinced Andrew that he is considered quite an accomplished and happy man.
The social media activity was not in vain. Andrew had never visited his hometown in all those years. His mother, grandmother, and grandfather came to visit him several times. And Andrew, for some reason, he didn't feel like going, but now the situation had changed.
The man suddenly felt that he was ready to see his small homeland again, to meet old friends, for whom he is a successful economist from the capital, to walk along the streets familiar from childhood, to look into a rock bar, to feel himself not a gray loser, but a capital guest who managed to get out of the wilderness. Of course I will, Kevin, he thought. Andrew arrived in his hometown in the late afternoon. He didn't take a cab, but decided to walk. Not much had changed here. The same dusty stretches of highway, the same sidewalks, the same lush greenery. Familiar streets, parks, squares surrounded him everywhere. A strange feeling swept over the man. He longed for his past self, young, full of plans and hopes. It seemed that he was not like the others. The others would stay in town, but he, Andrew, would become someone great like Samuel. A man the locals would be proud to know, but not everything works out the way he wanted. Sure, Andrew lives and works in New York, but it's not what he once dreamed of. True, the locals don't realize it. At least for 1 week, Andrew will be able to feel like the person he wanted to be when he was young, he thought. And that made him happy. The family greeted their son and grandson joyfully and warmly. They hadn't seen each other much lately. Grandmother and grandfather had become quite old, and once they had seemed energetic and all-powerful to Andrew. Time spares no one, and Mom was not the beautiful and young woman she used to be. Andrew felt sad at the thought that they were the only people on the entire planet who cared about him. He didn't even want to think about the days when they would be gone and he would be all alone. The next day, Andrew met Kevin and his fiancée at a cafe. Emma turned out to be a very pretty and pleasant woman. Kevin didn't let go of her hand. It was obvious that the friend was in love with his companion with all his heart. Under Emma's blouse, he could see a neat tummy. So that's it. Kevin is going to be a father soon. That's news, Andrew thought. He reflected on the fact that he'd have a teenage child by now if it weren't for, who knows, maybe if that baby had been born, Andrew would have come back from New York to him when he realized things weren't working out in the capital. Maybe he would have proposed to Alex and they would all have been together, living a big and friendly family. I wish I had realized then in my youth. Here it is. Happiness itself came into my hands, and I kept chasing the mythical crane in the sky. The friendly reunion went great. Andrew and Kevin were joined by their old buddies. They sat and discussed the details of their upcoming wedding and laughed a lot, just like when they were kids and young adults. Andrew's friends were all married, solid men. Some had grown a belly, some were beginning to gray. Grown family men, all just as fun as they used to be. Then Kevin and Emma went home, and Andrew and his friends went to an almost native rock bar. Here, to the man's relief, almost nothing had changed either. The buddies came in here periodically. They still remained their own here, which was very warming to the soul. Andrew diligently played the role of a successful Muscovite, treating his buddies to a beer and telling them about his life. He didn't lie, of course, but he presented the facts in such a way as to preserve the image of a man who had managed to realize the dream of his youth. "Well done, Andrew," declared the friend, clapping the man on the shoulder. "As he always said, when you were young, you'll achieve more. And here you have done it. We're all even a little jealous of you here." Andrew smiled at his friend and remained silent. If he knew exactly what he was jealous of, the next day was the wedding. Andrew arrived at the appointed time. A crowd of dressed-up guests, the newlyweds' adult relatives, and their friends all gathered together. Andrew was even at first confused by such an abundance of strangers. Then his friends called him. All of them came to the party with their other halves. Family, serious people. They all had kids, jobs, apartments, cars, looking at his old friends, standing on the arm with their wives. Andrew once again felt that his life was passing aimlessly. Solemn registration, obligatory promenade with a photographer to the memorable places of the city. Champagne was flowing. The guests cheered, laughed, showered the newlyweds with compliments. Kevin and Emma really looked beautiful in love, happy. Then it was the restaurant's turn. Andrew had relaxed by then and was getting to know everyone he didn't know. The guests treated him warmly and friendly, asking about New York, talking respectfully about Andrew's career. Everything was exactly as he had imagined. In the restaurant, the dressed-up crowd was already waiting for the host of the evening, a cheerful, smiling guy. A new batch of guests had gathered on the porch. This is where Andrew got a surprise he couldn't have imagined. Among the crowd of newcomers, he saw Alex. At first, the man couldn't even believe his eyes. "I thought I was imagining things. But why would she be here in the first place?" Alex had changed, of course, during this time, but not so much that Andrew didn't recognize her. The same huge turquoise eyes, long, slightly wavy hair. Slender, touching, almost transparent. Only now there was a confidence in Alex's gaze that made her face even more attractive. Alex was wearing a flowing dress of a marvelous emerald shade, which suited her eyes so well. Her hair was beautifully pinned up in a way that revealed her beautiful face and spread over her graceful shoulders. She looked much younger than women her age and radiated warmth and energy. Andrew could feel it even from a distance. "Is that Alex?" Andrew turned to his buddy standing next to him. "What's she doing here?" "Alex." "Kevin invited her," the buddy replied. Andrew grinned. He wasn't very helpful.
At that moment, Alex noticed him too. Their eyes met, and Alex smiled. That beaming smile had a strange effect on Andrew.
How could he forget this radiant, warm smile, illuminating her face with some special light? But on the other hand, anger suddenly rose in his soul. For some unknown reason, he suddenly made her Alex the culprit of his not-so-successful life. Alex, years ago, was just plain obsessive. She was annoying, demanding his attention, and unwilling to give him any freedom. It was from her that he had decided to leave for New York before he was fully ready to do so. Now he's decided it's all her fault. And now Andrew was forced to live a miserable existence, and Alex came to the wedding. So beautiful, successful, and confident, smiling at him with a sense of superiority. Andrew nodded dryly to Alex and hurried to disappear into the crowd. The festivities were not so pleasant now. From his seat, Andrew watched Alex having fun, easily talking to the guests, laughing and dancing. She apparently knew many people here, and them were asking her to dance. The young lady was undoubtedly a success. Strangely, she'd come to the wedding alone. Kevin invited her. Why would that be? Andrew's thoughts tried to find an explanation. From afar, it seemed to him that Alex's life had turned out well. She wore seemingly modest jewelry, inconspicuous earrings, and a thin necklace. But he was well aware of how much it cost. A fortune. The same could be said about the shoes, from a famous brand with a signature red sole. Alex didn't look like a resident of their town at all. She looked modest, but expensive and refined. Unlike the local ladies who liked to show themselves in all their glory for celebrations like weddings. Bright makeup, ostentatious clothes, elaborate hair, Alex stood out against their background, and it pissed Andrew off. It seemed to him that Alex looked at everyone from the level of his superiority, including him. Andrew wanted to bring Alex down to earth, showing her arrogance, and show her who she really was. A simple girl from the village, a former waitress, whom he had left years ago, not wanting to connect his life with a girl from the countryside. It seemed to him that he shouldn't act like an unchangeable queen here. After all, at this wedding, the couple's guest was him, Andrew, not her. He'd been waiting for the right moment. And now, at last, the moment had come. Alex took the tray and hurried to an elderly woman, apparently the bride's grandmother, who felt ill from the heat. Noticing this, Alex quickly went to the kitchen and returned with a tray with a carafe of cold water and a couple of glasses. Andrew hurried to meet his ex-fiancée, full of intentions to humiliate her. In his head, he had already formed a suitable phrase. Nay, hello. The past just wouldn't let go. Waitress reflexes in action. He was counting on those words to remind Alex of her past and who she really was. Alex looked up at Andrew with surprised eyes and seemed a little confused, and that was it. So much for the glossy exterior, Andrew thought. Alex hasn't changed a bit, and I still seem to be a huge influence on her. Just like before. Hello to you too, Alex said quietly, putting the tray in front of the old woman and stepping aside. Andrew, satisfied with himself, returned to his seat. He felt almost happy. Yes, he had managed to hurt Alex. Now she didn't look so arrogant and radiant in his eyes anymore, and that was great. Andrew decided to ask a young girl to dance, Emma's niece, I think. This girl had been sending him loving glances all evening, fascinated by the supposedly successful capital city guest. Andrew decided to capitalize on this impression and asked her to dance. She happily accepted. Andrew did it for Alex. Let her see how much fun he's having and how popular he is. Even the young beauties are throwing themselves around his neck. It seems that Andrew achieved the desired effect. Alex looked at him dancing with the young cousin of the bride, and there was sadness in her eyes. Perhaps she was jealous. Perhaps she still had feelings for Andrew. It was pleasant for Andrew to think so, but it wasn't enough for him. He wanted the people around him to laugh at Alex, though he couldn't understand why he wanted to do that. Perhaps by humiliating her, he felt more successful and important. Andrew secretly watched Alex, waiting for the right moment.
And that moment came. Someone spilled champagne on the floor, and Alex, not noticing the puddle, slipped, waving her hands. Almost falling, she grabbed the column at the last moment, miraculously keeping her balance. Someone suppressed an exclamation. Someone grinned. And Andrew said aloud,
Man, well, you were an elephant in a china shop, and you still are. Are you talking about the elephant in the china shop again? A familiar voice suddenly sounded. Andrew shifted his gaze from Alex to the man who had appeared behind her back and saw Samuel in front of him. He had come into the restaurant unnoticed, probably only a couple minutes ago. Samuel, without taking his eyes off Andrew, walked over to Alex, helped her up and put his arm around her waist. There was sadness on Alex's face. "That elephant in the china shop. Is that what you called her at the bar back then? Remember?" Samuel continued. Andrew nodded, though he couldn't recall that moment. "It was with that phrase of yours that my introduction to this wonderful girl began," Samuel said, smiling at Alex. "So, my many thanks to you. But don't say that to her again, or you'll have to deal with me." Samuel seemed to be joking. He was smiling as he said the phrase, but his eyes were dead serious. Stunned, Andrew returned to his seat. His lady, Emma's young cousin, sat down next to him and started chattering excitedly. Andrew didn't care for her. He was looking at Samuel, who was very gently supporting Alex by the hand. A crowd immediately gathered around them. Kevin was there too. Old acquaintances were drinking, joking, discussing something cheerfully. And Andrew couldn't bring himself to join them, even though he really wanted to. But he was too stunned, too lost. "What was going on here?" "I don't understand," he said at last. "What's Samuel doing here?" "These are Kevin's buddies. Kevin's known him since he was a kid. He's his idol," Andrew's young companion said. "Well, she was helpful. Surely this girl could give him some information." And Emma's cousin gladly told all she knew. It turns out that Samuel, who has already made quite a good career in New York, often visits his hometown. He has parents here who did not want to leave their small homeland, but also friends, of course. Samuel all this time continued to communicate with Kevin and his buddies. They often met at the rock bar. Andrew would have been in that hangout too if he hadn't left. So gradually, they all developed an almost friendly relationship. Alex. He met her at the same rock bar. They say that she was insulted by some guy right in front of Samuel. The girl shared the details. And it was because of that he paid attention to her. He liked her right away. Samuel fell in love with her, even wrote a lot of songs for her. In my opinion, these songs of his, which are for Alex, are the most beautiful. But Alex, I think she was in love with someone else at the time. She had some kind of unhappy love affair. Weird. Who could resist Samuel? This one was hoping, expecting something from her old boyfriend. He was said to have done her a bad turn, left her before the wedding, I think. So she was in a terrible state at the time. Emma said Alex was even in the hospital. I don't know what happened to her, but Andrew did. He knew why Alex was in the hospital, because she was so distressed. She lost her baby, their baby. Kevin and Emma told me. Alex didn't go back to work at the rock bar. She went to her family in the country, and Samuel found her, got her address from some people he knew and went. Samuel himself. It's such an amazing story. I never would have believed it could happen. Don't believe in fairy tales after that. Yeah, it's a really unique story. For some reason, Andrew was picturing it all very vividly. It was like watching a movie. Samuel goes to a rock bar every night hoping to meet the waitress who charmed him. Of course, he learned all he could about Alex from mutual acquaintances. Kevin and the other buddies all knew, of course, that Andrew had dumped Alex before the wedding and left for New York. The guys, they understood the friend, especially since he wasn't going to give up the baby, and even supported him. Approve of the deed. "Well, anyone can fall out of love, but dreams should come true," Kevin said in a deep voice when he heard Andrew was leaving. Samuel saved Alex, pulled her out of the depths of despair. He was there for her during the most difficult time of her life. At first, Samuel came to her village every day. Every time, he'd pour himself out in a lovely way. "Young Alex," says she, "it's strange, but she didn't want to be with him. How is that possible? I can't imagine. Such a man. And she must have loved the old one, the one who left her on the eve of her wedding." But Samuel kept visiting her. It's so romantic. And of course, Alex melted. And they've been together ever since. What? They got married. Andrew saw a press report about Samuel's wedding, but there were no pictures of it online. And Samuel preferred to keep his private life private. Andrew had no idea that Samuel's wife was Alex. Alex, the woman he'd run away from years ago and still had feelings for. Why else would he suddenly have this strange desire to humiliate her in front of everyone? Yes, they got married. The wedding was here, by the way. Both of them didn't want to make a big fuss about it. It was a quiet, low-key affair. Then they flew to New York and live there now. They flew here to visit Samuel's parents for a couple days. Kevin found out about it and invited them to the wedding. Pretty cool, huh? Alex got here first. Samuel had some urgent business to attend to, but here he is. Really, they make a great couple. Andrew looked at Samuel and Alex. They were sitting at the other end of the table surrounded by guests. Samuel gently put his arm around his spouse's shoulders, and she put her hand on his knee. Idle, they really did look like a harmonious couple and looked simply gorgeous together. Andrew suddenly realized that he was the one who wanted to hug Alex and look into her eyes. He was the one who wanted that woman's smile. He would never again meet someone who would love him so genuinely. Andrew had tried many times, but it was all wrong. He destroyed his happiness years ago with his own hands. And now his reality is he works for pennies, lives alone, no friends, no favorite woman by his side, no children. The man who was once his idol and whom Andrew still sincerely admires, Samuel, considers him a scoundrel. And rightly so, by the way. They have children. Andrew's companion, as if reading his thoughts, completed the picture of Alex's current happy life. She had no idea that Andrew was the cruel bridegroom who left his bride before the wedding. Otherwise, she would hardly have spoken to him in such a friendly manner. The boy and the girl are twins. I've even seen them. They're so cute, like the babies in the commercials. Andrew felt like a jerk. First, he wanted to make a splash with the people he knew, to come here, some sort of metropolitan visitor. Successful, more accomplished than his small-town friends. At least for a couple days, to feel like someone more important than he really was.
And Alex. Wanting to humiliate her was pathetic and ridiculous too. She was doing so well in her life that his attempts to ruin her mood looked silly, to say the least. Andrew couldn't stand being here any longer. The very atmosphere was weighing on him. The sight of happy faces, familiar faces from the past, made him sick. It was not enough to start behaving inappropriately in front of everyone. Andrew felt that he was close to smashing a plate on the floor, smashing the wall with his fist in the end, or even worse, crying. He was cut short by a cloud of all sorts of emotions. Andrew realized he had to leave, silently, quickly, without saying goodbye to anyone. Samuel himself was here. It was unlikely that anyone would notice Andrew's disappearance now. The man got up and headed for the exit. Hurry, 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 to get away from here. I don't care where. It was not a matter of the first importance.
And so Andrew wandered through the night streets. He's already gotten a decent distance from the restaurant. His feet carry him toward the center of town. The man passed a rock bar. No, he had no desire to return to that place. He left behind the public garden where he spent so much time with his friends, bypassed the amusement park. He had many memories with each of these places, mostly happy and pleasant ones. He didn't want to go home. His mom, grandfather, and grandmother would be there. They would start asking Andrew about what had happened. They'd be worried, anxious. No, it's better to be outside by yourself. Andrew will come back later when the family is asleep. The man walked through his hometown, wherever he could see. Crushed, confused, he felt like a complete nobody and regretted that he had come to Kevin's wedding. He wished this situation had never happened in the first place. Andrew, wait, I can't catch up with you. A voice came from behind him. The man turned around and it was the same young girl, Emma's cousin, rushing toward him. Andrew didn't even remember her name. What are you doing here? You left so suddenly. I followed you. Your face was strange and very sad, I think. Why did you follow me? Why did you follow me? The man was surprised. Well, because I didn't feel like breaking up with you. Andrew looked into her pure, sincere eyes and wondered, could it be that he, so lowly and mean, could like this young creature? Apparently, the girl was really fascinated by him. Strangely, but it made his soul warm. Andrew realized that not all was lost. He's only 35. A whole life is ahead of him, and what kind of life it will be depends only on him. Obviously, the man had made a lot of mistakes, but he's only human. The main thing is to make the right conclusions and live on, live happily. Something needs to change in yourself, in your worldview. If the previous actions led to such a deplorable result, it means only one thing. Now it is necessary to act differently. That's all. The girl looked at Andrew with hope. In her eyes, he saw admiration. No, the man was not going to take advantage of the young beauty's naivety. Right now, he would just walk her to the restaurant, and there was no telling what could happen to a young girl on the street at night. Andrew will say something reassuring and wise to her goodbye. He's an adult, and he'll leave this town. He's got a long way to go to work out his mistakes, but it's going to work out. It's going to work out.